Relics from the Night We Both Perished. May 17th, 2019. Each precious thing I've ever shown him is a holy relic from the night we both perished, the night when I combed him from my hair and watered the moon with his blood. An ivory fang stapled against a black curtain like the X-ray of child's broken bone, a glorious thing to be worshipped, or to at least be acknowledged as vessel of sorrow, creator of tides, pitcher of divine light. He was nothing more than milkweed to be plucked, a discarded plant to be uprooted and torn by the stem until it lies there quivering in your hand, shaking, trembling, frightened. I didn't kill him because I wanted to. That would have been too easy, far too plain-spoken for my preference. It's the same reason I didn't kill him while he slept in the passenger seat on one of our moonlit drives through the countryside, a container of bleach in my hand and my thumb gently unscrewing the cap. I can so distinctly recall how his ear resembled the perfect drain, a small, shapely spiral circling further and further inside him, carrying obscenities to their resting places, tucked away deep inside his darkest recesses. If he had darkest recesses, that is. I knew for certain he was far more benign in his practices, his handling of life and other people. I killed him because to let him live, to let him exist, would have been an insult. It's not that I didn't love him. I certainly would never want you thinking that. Of course, there's a part of me that resents him, especially late at night when I see his ghost, the ball gag fixed between his chapped lips. He comes to me in dreams. Nightmares would imply I detest the thought of them, and I don't, or at least I haven't, and he's dressed in a black satin corset, the breasts I've wished for him hanging out, and nipples stiffening like metal screws. There's a giant hole where his face once was, a soundless vacuum sucking him deeper and deeper into oblivion, until he's a stain I can smear upon the world. A skull where his thighs come together, a small centipede coiling inside the vacancy of his face. He asks to speak, but I tighten the reins securing him, as if he were a disgraced show horse, as if he were a black beetle, his wings forever torn off. I didn't kill him because I found his conversation trite or his knowledge of musical theater to be abysmal at best. After all, how can I expect any man under the age of 30 to know by heart the entire score to Chess by Tim Rice, Benny Andersson, and Bjorn Ulvaeus? Of course, the show had its string of hit songs in the 80s, but he was born in the late 90s, and he always referred to me as an old soul, a priceless vessel to warehouse the marvelous and the celestial. Yes, he often referred to me as precious, as if I was marked fragile, handle with care. You'd think a young man qualified for even the most menial office job would understand I was the furthest thing from a delicate heirloom, that I was a vile thing, obscene and unspeakable. Of course, there's a part of me that still wonders if he knew, if he had somehow known when I came to him and snuffed out the candle I had lovingly tended to and kept burning within him for so long. It was only natural for the wax to melt, for the wick to shorten to a small nub, and for the flame to eventually go out. I had thought of ending things for a while. I suppose we all do in some way, even if we're content, dangerously happy with the body we're sleeping next to, with the body we use for intimacy, for companionship, for love. Little insects, barbed and dangerous with their glittering exoskeletons and their sharp pincers, circle inside my head and whisper indecencies to me. For once, I'd like to see myself outside of myself, if that even makes sense. I'd like to crawl outside of my head and look back at the horrible thing I've become, the soulless spirit residing inside my shell. For some reason lately, I've been thinking of chess, not necessarily the musical, but rather the actual game. I had always told him that intimacy, the art of wooing and capitulating to another person, was a lot like chess. I don't necessarily know how to play, but I often found the history of chess fascinating. I told him about an automated chess-playing machine known as the Mechanical Turk, invented in the late 17th century. How this automaton toured the most expensive, the most distinguished, the most noble salons in Europe, and could never be beaten, no matter the experience of the opposing player. Being in love with him was very much like executing a game with a mechanical chess-playing machine, I imagine. I knew in my heart that I would always win, that I would never compromise, that I would never let him deep enough inside me to latch on and secure himself as if it were a new home. I knew I never wanted to be his home. No matter how much he begged, no matter how much he pleaded, I'd sooner swallow wet concrete than let him call me his or dare to call him mine. More importantly, like the mechanical Turk, our love was an illusion, something that had been invented by others. I killed him because if I didn't, something might have tethered us together, and that would have been a suffering far too unimaginable for me to even consider. There was something unnatural about even the mere thought of us together, let alone the sight of it. I don't necessarily say that because we were two men. I don't want you thinking I'm of the self-loathing variety because A, that's a tired cliché, B, that's not true. I simply say that because there are moments shared between two people when you realize you're in the wrong person. You're sharing a toothbrush with the wrong mouth. You're sharing a pair of loafers with the wrong feet. There was something distinctly peculiar about the two of us together, and I had known it from the moment I had first met him, when he had begged for my attention at the small cafe where I ordered my coffee every morning. There comes a point when you need to recognize the expiration date of a relationship. For me and him, that date had passed a long time ago, and my mind continued to tell me. Of course, at first I played it off. You don't know what you're talking about. He's so lovely to me. He really cares about me. The carnage of my thoughts, the privacy I had been afforded. I had killed him many times there, imagined what it might feel like, how he might panic, how he might plead and beg with me. I haven't thought of him much since it first happened, since the night when I first pulled his teeth, plucked his fingernails, and organized them accordingly, as if they were broken remnants, artifacts in the museum of our love, a gallery of yellowing antiquity. There was a time when I would seek a private moment, imagining his helpless body fruiting with more decay. In my thoughts, I would tell him, "You'll find me tucked away in the blistered sinew of what was once healthy and pink, now tender and black." There were many things I imagined doing to him, cracking him open as if he were some expensive delicacy imported from a faraway land, and gorging on his entrails until my stomach was fit to burst. Then there was the period of time I referred to him as the wax priest, as if he were a holy man to be worshipped, to be revered and adored for his anguish. He didn't care much for the nickname, and he, of course, never knew the real reason why I referred to him as something so esoteric. The truth is, it would have been far more preferable for him to find a lump growing on his scrotum one morning than the plans I had designed for him. It would have been in his best interest to wilt and decay the way an animal carcass does when abandoned in the woods. I yearned for him to flower with cancer, a small ball made of beeswax claiming him and taking him from me. Unfortunately, that misfortune never came to him. You're probably wondering how I did it, how I managed to kill the man I supposedly loved, the one I worshipped, adored, shared intimacy, even when I was feeling particularly uninspired to perform. I would have never poured bleach in his ears. That would have been far too cruel for a man that deserved a painless ending. I certainly would have never pinned his ears with clothespins and hung him on a rack the way I had seen someone torture a small puppy online when I was 9 years old. Our dance together came to an end not long after his 26th birthday. There were, of course, things I wanted to say, words I wanted to share before the event, before I squeezed the life from him as if he were nothing more than a child's red balloon, a toy to be discarded after a birthday party. Something that might float up and away on an invisible string pulled by an ancient deity until I'm left standing alone on the chessboard of the mess we've made together, the illusion we had shared, the magic we had wrongfully invented. You've lost a lot of blood. Tamsen, her face twisted in horror, releases a scream so agonizing that it surprises her. A young woman in agony, filling every inch of the idling car. She lunges forward in the driver's seat, white-knuckling the steering wheel, screeches until hoarse, her eyes wet and shining. Just then, her eyes snap to the rearview mirror. She sees her reflection, drenched in black oil as dark as blood, head to toe. She glances in the passenger seat, empty cans of motor oil and gasoline. Beside them, a small lighter. She can scarcely believe it. What had she intended to do? She straightens, remembering. Panic returns. "Presley," she says. Her head jerks to the back seat. There she finds her brother, a cherub-faced 11-year-old boy. He glistens, drenched with oil, and stares at her with panic. Tamsen chokes on quiet sobs, trembling, eyes dimmed and glassy, forever lost in the nightmare. As Tamsen's car idles in the breakdown lane of the abandoned roadway, she wipes her face with a rag and circles the vehicle. She pops open the trunk. In there, she finds the splintered remains of a wooden pine tree carving. Face-scrunching, confused, she tosses it aside. Finally, she uncovers what she's been looking for: 2 suitcases. She unzips one of them and then grimaces, greeted by a sparkling gold lame tuxedo suit. Tosses it aside. Reveals a pirate costume. She spies Presley through the backseat window. Shoulders slumped, he cleans his face with a rag. His eyes dart to her, concerned. She waves both costumes at him in the air. "Pick one," she says. After driving a few miles further up the road, they come upon a small park and a public restroom. Tamsen parks in one of the empty spaces, passes the gold lame suit to her brother, and then sends him into the men's restroom to wash himself. Once she's cleaned herself as well, Tamsen meets her reflection in the grime-covered bathroom mirror. She scans her body, from her auburn pixie haircut to the tattoo of 2 black ribbons wrapped around her ankle. She twists the rust-eaten faucet. Brown water sputters. She lurches back, disgusted. Grabs a bottle of hand sanitizer from her bag, douses her hands with it, a nervous habit. She winces. The screech of metal against metal pulsing through her head. She doubles over and vomits. When she's finished dressing in clean clothes, she returns to the car parked out front and starts scrubbing the leather seats clean. After she's finished cleaning the seats, she rinses the black juices from her washcloth and tosses it aside. She leans against the car, whips out her phone, and begins to scroll through her missed messages. Tapping on the screen, she holds the phone to her ear. The brittle, thin shriek of the woman's voice greets her on the other end. She flinches at the sound. "Miss Dearling, we're delighted to welcome you as our new lead game developer at the Zimpago project," the voice tells her. "All of the information you'll need can be found in the letter we've addressed to you." Phone pressed against her ear, Tamsen leans over the passenger seat and digs through the papers scattered on the floor. She recovers a crumpled sheet of paper and unfolds it. The paper's header, emblazoned with an ornate insignia. The Zimpago Project. An address, 164 Carter Road, Whitefield, New Hampshire, 03598. "We ask that you have your samples prepared when you arrive," the voice says. "All lodgings and provisions will be taken care of while you stay with us. We are very much looking forward to working with you." The recording ends. Tamsen taps the screen, reviewing the call log. All her messages. Deleted. Except for one. Unknown caller. The screen flickers out, her phone dying. Gosh! Tamsen hops in the driver's seat, shoving the keys into the ignition. She grabs the stick shift. Then her eyes snap outside the windshield, noticing Presley as he approaches the car. He's dressed in his sparkling gold lame Elvis-inspired suit and has a Polaroid camera looped around his neck. He slows as he approaches the vehicle, eyebrows furrowing. Tamsen climbs out of the car, swallows, uncomfortable. "Elvis," she says. "Good choice. Dad's favorite." Tamsen pouts at the reminder. She bites her lip, nodding. Suddenly, she notices her brother's eyes fixed on the vehicle's front grille. She circles the hood, puzzled. "What is it?" she asks him. Presley merely points. Her eyes follow. She sees it. Her front right headlight, completely shattered.
The glittering pieces, broken and hanging like the bits of a cracked eggshell. Gosh, Presley corrects her. Excrement. Tamsen kneels, inspecting the damage. Presley snaps a picture. The camera whirs alive, printing. Did we hit something? He asks. I'll get a ticket if we don't stop to change it, Tamsen says, shoving her hands into her pockets. I have to ask for directions, too. She huffs, heading back for the driver's seat. Glances back. Notices Presley still standing there. Let's go. But he seems to hesitate, as if distrustful. What? She asks. Did you think I was going to leave you? Presley squints, guarding his eyes from the morning sunlight. Come on, Tamsen says, flashing him a smile. Maybe they sell books at the auto parts store. Presley softens. Tamsen climbs in the car. Presley follows, jumping in the back seat. The car creeps out of the parking lot, easing back onto the road. It's not long before they come upon a small shack fronted with a rickety-looking wraparound porch. 2 antique gas pumps are arranged in the parking lot. Tamsen's car meanders off the narrow roadway, parking beside one of the pumps. A grizzled gas attendant dressed in flannel and a moth-eaten baseball cap abandons his newspaper and limps toward the vehicle. Tamsen climbs out of her seat, greeting him. Fill her up for you? The attendant asks, smearing the drool from his lower lip. She pats her pockets, realizing she's out of change. I'll get you on my way back, she promises him. The gas attendant rolls his eyes, unconvinced. Tamsen opens the backseat door and greets Presley as he sits there, fiddling with his Polaroid camera. I'll be quick, okay? Presley merely nods. Tamsen shuts the door, dashing across the lot, up the porch steps, and into the roadside convenience store. The screen door snaps shut behind her. She jolts, knocking into novelty toys dangling from the ceiling. She ducks, inching further inside. Large black flies swarm her. She swats at them and rinses her hands with more hand sanitizer. The front counter, empty. Beads dangle from a ceiling fan. A small TV arranged in a corner, static washing the screen. Hello, I'm looking... A headlight. She searches the front counter, filled with stacks of freshly jarred maple syrup. Scans the racks of newspapers. Her eyes jerk to a headline. She picks up the paper and reads, Parents blame college students' untimely death on new violent video games. Tamsen tosses the paper aside. Without warning, an old woman appears in the doorway. She has the haggard face of an ancient deity, takes a drag from a cigarette, releases a cloud of smoke from her stoma. Her voice filled with gravel. What do you need? She asks. Tamsen hesitates, cautious. I broke one of my headlights.
Do you sell replacements? The old woman points a crooked finger and turns her head slightly, revealing a black ring stretching a giant hole in her cheek. Window cleaners and oil down there, she says, pulling at the whiskers on her chin. Haven't seen headlights in a while. You can check. The old woman perches behind the counter, watching. Tamsen, uneasy, begins to meander down the aisle. She glances out a nearby window as she passes and notices something. A dark grove of trees nestled on the opposite side of the roadway. Tamsen squints, leaning toward the glass. She sees movement. Some of the branches stir. As the undergrowth comes apart, a dark figure rips itself from hiding. The vague outline of its human-like body, an ornate latticework of thin steel wires and dripping wet with black sludge. Its ragged form, shiny metal filaments like the exposed circulatory system of a body without any muscle or skin. The creature turns, its head nothing more than a threadbare ball masked with wires. Without warning, Presley flies into the store, tripping over a wooden pine tree carving and snapping it in half. "Tam!" he shouts. The old woman reels from her seat, furious. "You have to pay for that!" she barks at him. But he doesn't hear her. Presley dashes toward Tamsen, but stops short of a hug. "Prez?" The old woman barrels down the aisle with the splintered remains of the pine tree carving. "It's $10, she says. Tamsen glares at Presley with mother-like disappointment. "Presley!" "I'm sorry," he says, shrinking. Presley seems to search her for forgiveness. The way his mouth pulls downward, the despair flickering in his eyes, she can't stay mad at him. "Clean slate," she says, exhaling. Tamsen opens her wallet and finds a $10 bill. Her last one. Sulking, she hands it to the old woman. The old crone shoves the broken pine tree at Presley, then returns to the counter. Tamsen trails her. "Do you know if there's a place around here that sells car parts?" Tamsen asks. "Where you headed?" "Other side of the mountain," Tamsen says, smoothing the letter from her pocket and checking the address. "Whitefield?" "My sister makes monsters," Presley says, peering over the store counter. Tamsen eyes Presley as if to say, "Not now." He shrinks, moving away back down the aisle. "It's the Zimpago estate," Tamsen says. "Do you know?" Suddenly, Tamsen notices how the old woman seems to slow, her eyes dimming with a glassy film. "He's waiting for you," the old woman says, her eyes rolling to the back of her head as if lost in a trance. "Only the boy can destroy him." Without warning, a black centipede crawls out from her stoma, slithers up her throat, and disappears inside her open cheek. She bites down. Crunch. The old woman's pupils finally center, as if severed from her trance. She blows smoke in Tamsen's face and then retreats to the stockroom where she disappears. Tamsen's mouth hangs open in disbelief. Her eyes shoot across the counter to the television screen. On the screen, a middle-aged mother is being interviewed by a well-dressed reporter. The mother wipes her eyes with a handkerchief, her voice trembling when she speaks. "I'll always blame the video games for what happened to him," the mother says. "They changed him. He wasn't my son anymore." Tamsen pulls her eyes away. She sees Presley in the far corner of the store. He's distracted, reading the ingredients to a small box of rice. Tamsen hesitates, thinking, "Do I dare?" She swallows hard, finally making the decision as she tears out of the store. Hastening down the porch steps, she makes a dash toward her car. The gas attendant circles the hood, eyeing her with confusion. "Your boy took off running," he says, scratching his head. Tamsen pulls at the door handle, throwing herself into the driver's seat and shoving the keys into the ignition as the engine purrs sweetly. She grips the steering wheel. 10 and 2. Then, pushing on the brakes, she grabs the clutch, about to hit the gas. Suddenly, her eyes snap to the front porch of the convenience store. She sees her little brother standing there, lost, bewildered, as he holds the splintered remains of the pine tree carving. Sensing the color drain from her face, she realizes she's been caught. Tamsen turns off the car, flinging the door open as she climbs out. "I thought I hid some—" But her voice trails off, nervous. Presley doesn't react. "Ready?" she asks, her lips creasing with a rehearsed smile. She goes to open the back seat door, but he already has it opened. He slides inside with the pine tree. Tamsen lunges into the driver's seat, breath whistling. Adjusts the rearview mirror, looks at Presley. His eyes avoid her. She pushes the radio on. A woman's gentle, soothing voice fills the car stereo system. "Recovering joy from grief," the voice announces. "A guide to living a happy and healthy life after the death of a loved one." Tamsen looks in the rearview mirror, observing Presley as he tinkers with his camera. Her eyes widen when she notices her brother's mouth moving along to every word with the audio. "Chapter 4, Another Beginning," the woman's voice says. "You deserve another chance. Yes, I mean you. Some people are afraid of starting over, but not you. Not anymore." Tamsen shifts the car into gear, easing on the gas. The vehicle ambles out of the lot and drifts into the tree-lined roadway. What she doesn't seem to notice is how, as they drive off, the pavement seems to lift from the ground and rises, disappearing into the air like wisps of smoke. Tamsen's car crawls down a narrow driveway and slows as it nears a massive iron gate. The balusters, roped with steel wires like vines. Stone pillars tower above the small vehicle. Rusted metal statues of demonic creatures leer at her and Presley from their stone perches. Tamsen recoils, eyes searching the entrance. She notices Presley stir in the rearview mirror, grimacing as he cowers at the sneering metal sculptures. "What are they?" he asks. "Wait here." Tamsen opens the door, lifting herself out of her seat, and approaches the main gate. It's then she notices a small panel housing an intercom system buried in black weeds beside the gate. She holds down the call button. It rings softly. Then a red light appears, blinking.
A woman's voice answers, distorted, mechanical. Yes? Hi. Yes, I'm here to see Mr. Zimpago, Tamsen says, holding down the button. We're working on a project together. Your name? The woman's voice replies. Tamsen. Last name? Dealing. He's expecting me. The gate hums alive, the iron bolt unfastening. You'll have to open the gate manually, the woman explains, before the intercom's red light disappears. Tamsen's eyes follow the gate's iron rods to their gilded spikes. She searches the metal-winged sculptures squatting on both stone towers beside the entrance. Distracted by their grotesque appearances, she pulls the gate open and scrapes her palm against a shard of metal. Crying out, she checks her hand. The wound oozes black oil. As the gate swings open, it slams against her right headlight. More broken pieces shatter. Gosh, she looks at her hand. The oil? Gone. The wound? Vanished. She pushes the gate closed, kneeling beside the already bruised fender. Inspects the new damage, another dent in the bumper, and the headlight now completely shattered. Tamsen looks around, at a loss. Wind rushes past, whispering all around her. The car ambles up the stone driveway and pulls up to the main house, circling the small island of greenery arranged with a giant metal sculpture. The statue kneels, its head split open like a fresh axe wound. Hanging from its open mouth, as if in mid-retch, a black centipede. Tamsen's eyes wander from the statue to the colossal house looking down upon them. A modern-styled French chateau. The steep pitched towers, the elegant double-paned windows, the imperial-looking oak doorway set inside an arched opening. Presley peers through the window, aiming his camera. "This is our new home?" he asks. "Do you like it?" "It's a castle," he says, snapping a picture.
His eyes wide and filled with wonder. Climbing out of the car, Tamsen can't pull her eyes away from the house. Just then, the front door opens and a woman wearing a red hijab emerges and immediately greets them. Tamsen opens the back seat door. Presley climbs out, his camera aiming at the woman as she approaches. "Miss Dearling?" Tamsen pulls on her brother's hand, but soon recoils. She frowns, confused. The veins in his wrist feel hard, like cables. Before she can say something, Presley drags his hand out of hers. "Yes," Tamsen says, recapturing her composure. Tamsen, I'm Nadia, Mr. Zimpago's nurse and housekeeper." She extends her hand and they shake. Presley immediately snaps a picture of their handshake. The camera chirps, printing. "Press," Tamsen whispers, "not now." Nadia smiles at the little boy, noticing his golden costume. "You've brought royalty with you," she says, kneeling to greet him. "This is my brother, Presley," Tamsen says, pushing Presley closer toward Nadia. "It's very nice to meet you, Presley," Nadia says with a sincere smile. "We're excited to have you." Presley bites the tips of his finger, coyly, as he hands Nadia the Polaroid with a sheepish smile. "I'm sorry, my dear," she says. "I'll have to take that." Presley's shoulders drop, his head lowering. "You'll get it back when you leave, I promise." She holds out her hand. Presley unwraps the camera from his neck and passes it to her. Nadia then eyes Tamsen. "Cell phones too," she says. "No leaks." Without arguing, Tamsen hands her dead cell phone over to Nadia, who pockets it immediately. "The house is beautiful," Tamsen says. "I thought I'd have to pay a toll on the driveway. It should at least be considered a principality, don't you think?" Nadia asks. 76 acres, 10 of them gardens with flowers imported from Europe and Asia. Then, the house, 12 bedrooms, 8 baths, a self-contained suite in the attic. I still get lost. "How long have you worked for Mr. Zimpago?" Tamsen asks. "I have the lead on you with a day." "Only a day?" Suddenly Presley pulls at his sister's sleeve and points. "Who's that?" he asks. Tamsen and Nadia follow his finger to the house's attic window, where they see a dark figure staring down at them, watching. Then, as if called away, the figure withdraws and retreats behind the window curtain. "That's Mr. Zimpago's sister," Nadia explains. "She lives in the suite upstairs and handles her brother's business." Her eyes narrow at Tamsen. "She'll want to meet with you once you settle in." "Yes," Tamsen says, as if remembering. "Our bags." "Leave them," Nadia says. "I'll give you the tour first. We have a lot of ground to cover."
Nadia guides Tamsen and Presley as they scale the front steps toward the house's massive open doorway. "Does Edward Rochester live here too?" Presley says. "Who, dear?" Nadia asks. "From Jane Eyre," he says. Tamsen's eyes seem to linger on a statue leering at them from a ledge on the rooftop. The wrought iron figure, an axe raised high above its shoulders and prepared to bring the blade down. The wind murmurs all around Tamsen, carrying with it the sound of distant voices. "You've lost a lot of blood. I search for you until my lungs sprout metal. I search for you until my lungs sprout metal, until my hands crisp like rain-soaked parchment, until I can taste only blood and ash, both siblings of your exquisite martyrdom. And in that sadness, I find something lovely, something to keep me sated while I think of the man you once were, and how you had once held me like a child's body to be served as if it were the Holy Eucharist, a whisper closed off inside a metal sarcophagus, a mistake once made that can never be unmade. You've lost a lot of blood." Stories you can't tell at parties. February 12, 2019. Ambrose: "What are you thinking about?" Martyr: "Killing him." Martyr: "Nothing." Ambrose: "You look like you're lost in thought." Martyr: "I'd rather be lost than be found." Martyr: "I'm just thinking." Ambrose: "About our new place?" "No, about hurting him." Martyr: "Something else." Ambrose: "Tell me." Ambrose: "Can't sleep." "Tell me." Martyr: "I could do it right now. I could let go of the steering wheel and crash us into one of those trees." Martyr: "I was just thinking about a story I heard." "Yes?" Martyr: "It's stuck in my mind." "That's a funny expression." "Yes?" Ambrose: "Stuck in my mind. Like our brains are made of fly paper, and our thoughts are little insects to be captured, caught, and killed." What a stupid thing to say. It's just an expression, for goodness sake. The things he says, the delight he finds in the absurd, the ironic, that's not the reason why I'm going to kill him. In fact, I don't think I've ever really thought about the reason why I've so desperately wanted to hurt him, to watch him suffer. If our brains really are flypaper, then Ambrose would be the biggest horsefly you could imagine, buzzing through the corridors of my mind and building a small nest there. Martyr: "I was thinking about a story I read online. Somebody had posted about it on one of those chat forums, a place where you can share the most upsetting things you've ever seen." Ambrose: "Why were you looking there?" Martyr: "Because I like to think about things that upset me." Martyr: "I don't know. It just seemed to happen. I found this post about this mother who was practically suicidal. Her daughter was turning 13, and she wanted to surprise her with a birthday cake from her favorite bakery. It was a beautiful cake, vanilla frosting with roses for decoration. But the baker didn't tell the mother that they had inserted these sharp wooden sticks inside the cake because they had built it so high. So the time came for the daughter to blow out the candles at her birthday party, and the mother, without thinking, shoved her daughter's face into the cake, stabbing her in the eye. They rushed her to the hospital, but it was too late to save the poor girl's eye. She's blind now in her left eye, wears an eye patch, a permanent souvenir of her mother's affection, her mother's playfulness, her mother's terrible mistake. How awful. Yeah, Ambrose, I guess that's one story you can't tell at parties. I don't know about that. You don't? That statement implies that there are, in fact, correct stories to tell at parties. How would you know? You could be entertaining a group of aristocrats. Certainly they might object to such a gruesome tale, but a colony of lepers wouldn't. In fact, they might praise you for passing along such a yarn. But that implies that the lepers are less than the aristocrats, aren't they? Maybe in some people's eyes, but what about a leprous aristocrat? No such thing. You've never heard of King Baldwin IV of Jerusalem? I haven't. One of the few noblemen to suffer from the disease. He developed leprosy when he was very young. Permanently sick throughout the entirety of his ruling, he soon became blind and suffered severe ulceration of the extremities. He might object to your story. It isn't my story. It's some poor, pathetic woman on the internet. It belongs to her. Stories don't belong to people. If they're published, they do. The certain arrangement of words written down, if I were to publish them, they'd belong to me. If anybody dared to take them from me, recycle them, and reuse them as their own, that's plagiarism. True, but I'm talking about oral history, stories that aren't written anywhere, that are mythic, that belong to the mouths that share them. For instance, that story you just told, that became something else when you told it. You could have left out certain information, added what you wanted. Storytelling is an art form, and it belongs to no one. What's a story you know? Something that upsets you, disturbs you, something that hasn't been written down, something that you heard, that merely exists in the minds of those who have heard it. It's not something I like to think about.
Pansy. Always deflecting. Even when we're having a conversation that remotely interests me, engages me, he finds a way to deny me what I'm after, what I really want most of all. Tell me. If I tell you, it won't be disturbing. Why's that? I could tell you something disturbing. Tell you a story about a teenager who had his foreskin ripped off during intimacy, and the girl he was with still finished connecting with him anyway, blood smearing the poor girl's face. Or tell you a story about a businessman who was paid $100 to eat fresh bird gosh from the hood of his car. They might make you recoil, shrink in disgust when I describe certain things, but I'd unsettle you even more if I chose not to share with you the disturbing story I know. Your mind would invent something even more grotesque, more upsetting than my words could ever conjure. You're not going to tell me? And that's what makes it a truly upsetting story. Think about the film, The Thing. Is it as frightening as a more thoughtful and precise effort like The Haunting? I don't see how you can compare the two, especially if we're talking about The Thing and The Haunting. They're two completely separate pieces of art, frightening in their own ways. But clearly one is superior. There's something far more unnerving about what you don't see than what you're actually shown. The same fear you experience when you see human bodies twist and curl into absurd abominations isn't the same as when Julie Harris turns on the bedroom lights and wonders whose hand had been holding hers in the dark. That argument implies that one film is superior to the other. Well, of course. You can't compare the two. Of course you can. One of the films uses provocative and outlandish practical effects to astound and titillate, while the other film establishes mood and an overwhelming sense of dread early on to create a truly horrific experience. So, you're saying that Carpenter's The Thing is inferior to The Haunting? Naturally. If I showed you something horrible, you'd piss yourself and run screaming. But there's something to be said about being far more afraid of what we don't see. It's the same reason some people don't like to swim in the ocean. If we see something truly horrible, immediately we can assess it and recognize its flaws. But to be sidelined by something from beneath the water, to become prey to some ancient deity circling the black depths, is something far more serious. Your mind can invent something truly horrible when the monster is kept out of sight. Think of the opening scene in Jaws. I knew you were going to bring that up. We never even see the shark attack the poor girl, but our minds invent something far more hideous when the monster is alluded to as opposed to being paraded out in the open. I like to see the monster. I like to know exactly what I'm dealing with. There's nothing unsettling about not seeing the creature. It's annoying. Besides, most of the time it's done because they can't afford to show the monster. That's not always true. Besides, our minds are complex and capable of inventing something far more gruesome from inferences and implications. That's why I'm not telling you the story I'm thinking of. I'm going to let you wonder, to let you consider what it could have been. So, you're not going to tell me? Think about the car we're in right now. If I told you there's somebody sitting in the dark back seat, your eyes might snap to the rearview mirror. You might become unsettled, annoyed that you can't see what I'm seeing. There's nobody sitting in the back seat that you can see right now, but notice how the light doesn't reach all the way. Some of the seat is still dark. In fact, I'd say most of the seat is dark. Someone could easily be sitting there, watching you, and you'd never know. That's more frightening than seeing them there. The possibility of them being there, knowing that they can see you, but you can't see them. You're goading me. You don't like to think about it. I don't like to think about a lot of things. Like what? Can't tell you. They'd frighten you. Touché. I'll tell you this. There's stories you can't tell at parties. You've lost a lot of blood. Her daughter was turning 13, and she wanted to surprise her with a birthday cake from her favorite bakery. It was a beautiful cake, vanilla frosting with roses for decoration. But the baker didn't tell the mother that they had inserted these sharp wooden sticks inside the cake because they had built it so high.
So the time came for the daughter to blow out the candles at her birthday party, and the mother, without thinking, shoved her daughter's face into the cake, stabbing her in the eye. They rushed her to the hospital, but it was too late to save the poor girl's eye. She's blind now in her left eye, wears an eye patch, a permanent souvenir of her mother's affection, her mother's playfulness, her mother's terrible mistake. How awful. Yeah, I guess that's one story you can't tell at parties. I don't know about that. You don't? That statement implies that there are, in fact, correct stories to tell at parties. How would you know? You could be entertaining a group of aristocrats. Certainly they might object to such a gruesome tale. But a colony of lepers wouldn't. In fact, they might praise you for passing along such a yarn. But that implies that the lepers are less than the aristocrats, aren't they? Maybe in some people's eyes. But what about a leprous aristocrat? No such thing. You've never heard of King Baldwin IV of Jerusalem? I haven't. One of the few noblemen to suffer from the disease. He developed leprosy when he was very young. Permanently sick throughout the entirety of his ruling, he soon became blind and suffered severe ulceration of the extremities. He might object to your story. It isn't my story. It's some poor, pathetic woman on the internet. It belongs to her. Stories don't belong to people. If they're published, they do. The certain arrangement of words written down, if I were to publish them, they belong to me. If anybody dared to take them from me, recycle them, and reuse them as their own, that's plagiarism. True, but I'm talking about oral history, stories that aren't written anywhere, that are mythic, that belong to the mouths that share them. For instance, that story you just told, that became something else when you told it. You could have left out certain information, added what you wanted. Storytelling is an art form, and it belongs to no one. What's a story you know? Something that upsets you, disturbs you, something that hasn't been written down, something that you heard, that merely exists in the minds of those who have heard it. It's not something I like to think about. Pansy. Always deflecting. Even when we're having a conversation that remotely interests me, engages me, he finds a way to deny me what I'm after, what I really want most of all. Tell me. If I tell you, it won't be disturbing. Why's that? I could tell you something disturbing. Tell you a story about a teenager who had his foreskin ripped off during intimacy, and the girl he was with still finished connecting with him anyway, blood smearing the poor girl's face. Or tell you a story about a businessman who was paid $100 to eat fresh bird gosh from the hood of his car. They might make you recoil, shrink in disgust when I describe certain things, but I'd unsettle you even more if I chose not to share with you the disturbing story I know. Your mind would invent something even more grotesque, more upsetting than my words could ever conjure. You're not going to tell me? And that's what makes it a truly upsetting story. Think about the film The Thing. Is it as frightening as a more thoughtful and precise effort like The Haunting? I don't see how you can compare the two, especially if we're talking about The Thing and The Haunting. They're two completely separate pieces of art, frightening in their own ways. But clearly one is superior. There's something far more unnerving about what you don't see than what you're actually shown. The same fear you experience when you see human bodies twist and curl into absurd abominations isn't the same as when Julie Harris turns on the bedroom lights and wonders whose hand had been holding hers in the dark. That argument implies that one film is superior to the other. Well, of course. You can't compare the two. Of course you can. One of the films uses provocative and outlandish practical effects to astound and titillate, while the other film establishes mood and an overwhelming sense of dread early on to create a truly horrific experience. So, you're saying that Carpenter's The Thing is inferior to The Haunting? Naturally. If I showed you something horrible, you'd piss yourself and run screaming. But there's something to be said about being far more afraid of what we don't see. It's the same reason some people don't like to swim in the ocean. If we see something truly horrible, immediately we can assess it and recognize its flaws. But to be sidelined by something from beneath the water, to become prey to some ancient deity circling the black depths, is something far more serious. Your mind can invent something truly horrible when the monster is kept out of sight. Think of the opening scene in Jaws. I knew you were going to bring that up. We never even see the shark attack the poor girl. But our minds invent something far more hideous when the monster is alluded to as opposed to being paraded out in the open. I like to see the monster. I like to know exactly what I'm dealing with. There's nothing unsettling about not seeing the creature. It's annoying. Besides, most of the time it's done because they can't afford to show the monster. That's not always true. Besides, our minds are complex and capable of inventing something far more gruesome from inferences and implications. That's why I'm not telling you the story I'm thinking of. I'm going to let you wonder, to let you consider what it could have been. So, you're not going to tell me? Think about the car we're in right now. If I told you there's somebody sitting in the dark back seat, your eyes might snap to the rearview mirror. You might become unsettled, annoyed that you can't see what I'm seeing. There's nobody sitting in the back seat that you can see right now, but notice how the light doesn't reach all the way. Some of the seat is still dark. In fact, I'd say most of the seat is dark. Someone could easily be sitting there, watching you, and you'd never know. That's more frightening than seeing them there. The possibility of them being there, knowing that they can see you, but you can't see them. You're goading me. You don't like to think about it. I don't like to think about a lot of things. Like what? Can't tell you.
You're not going to tell me? Ambrose. And that's what makes it a truly upsetting story. Think about the film The Thing. Is it as frightening as a more thoughtful and precise effort like The Haunting? I don't see how you can compare the two, especially if we're talking about The Thing and The Haunting. They're two completely separate pieces of art, frightening in their own ways. But clearly one is superior. There's something far more unnerving about what you don't see than what you're actually shown. The same fear you experience when you see human bodies twist and curl into absurd abominations isn't the same as when Julie Harris turns on the bedroom lights and wonders whose hand had been holding hers in the dark. That argument implies that one film is superior to the other. Well, of course. You can't compare the two. Of course you can. One of the films uses provocative and outlandish practical effects to astound and titillate, while the other film establishes mood and an overwhelming sense of dread early on to create a truly horrific experience. So you're saying that Carpenter's The Thing is inferior to The Haunting? Naturally. If I showed you something horrible, you'd piss yourself and run screaming. But there's something to be said about being far more afraid of what we don't see. It's the same reason some people don't like to swim in the ocean. If we see something truly horrible, immediately we can assess it and recognize its flaws. But to be sidelined by something from beneath the water, to become prey to some ancient deity circling the black depths, is something far more serious. Your mind can invent something truly horrible when the monster is kept out of sight. Think of the opening scene in Jaws. I knew you were going to bring that up. We never even see the shark attack the poor girl, but our minds invent something far more hideous when the monster is alluded to as opposed to being paraded out in the open. I like to see the monster. I like to know exactly what I'm dealing with. There's nothing unsettling about not seeing the creature. It's annoying. Besides, most of the time it's done because they can't afford to show the monster. That's not always true. Besides, our minds are complex and capable of inventing something far more gruesome from inferences and implications. That's why I'm not telling you the story I'm thinking of. I'm going to let you wonder, to let you consider what it could have been. So, you're not going to tell me? Think about the car we're in right now. If I told you there's somebody sitting in the dark back seat, your eyes might snap to the rearview mirror. You might become unsettled, annoyed that you can't see what I'm seeing. There's nobody sitting in the back seat. That you can see right now. But notice how the light doesn't reach all the way. Some of the seat is still dark. In fact, I'd say most of the seat is dark. Someone could easily be sitting there, watching you, and you'd never know. That's more frightening than seeing them there. The possibility of them being there, knowing that they can see you, but you can't see them. You're goading me. You don't like to think about it. I don't like to think about a lot of things. Like what? Can't tell you. They'd frighten you. Touché. I'll tell you this. There's stories you can't tell at parties. You've lost a lot of blood.
Nadia leads Tamsen and Presley into the marble-floored entryway where a giant bust of Abbus Zimpago greets them, a well-coiffed gentleman with an easily frowning mouth and caterpillar-like eyebrows. Nadia shows Tamsen the fingerprint scanner beside the door. Every door in the house instantly locks and can only be opened by using these scanners, she explains. We'll have to take a reading of your fingerprint so you have access. Tamsen senses her face scrunch with bewilderment as her eyes come upon a large dent in the wall beside the main entryway. Every room is monitored with a security system, Nadia says. If you try to access an unrestricted area more than 3 times, you'll set off the emergency system. Nadia's voice trails off as she lectures, Tamsen's attention following Presley as he seems to notice a few small pink flower petals settling on the marble floor. They glitter, winking at him as if light were being reflected off them. Presley trails the petals while they scatter at his feet. He chases them until he reaches the grand hall, Tamsen chasing after him. His eyes follow the glittering blooms as they drift up toward a Japanese cherry tree. Framed in the glow of the room's skylight, the massive tree drips petals from blossom-gowned branches. My favorite room in the house, Nadia says, appearing in the doorway behind brother and sister. Tamsen, mouth open, approaches the tree. This isn't... Her voice trails off. She reaches out to touch the tree trunk, her fingers passing through a glistening curtain of light, a hologram. The cherry tree flickers, then vanishes as if it were sucked into the drain fixed at the center of the floor. A giant waterfall replaces the tree, thundering into the room. A shimmering screen of water cascades at Presley's feet. He lurches back, startled. Careful, Nadia says. It has 12 different settings, everything from a windmill in the Netherlands to a palm tree in the Amazon. But this one is my favorite. The water roars, curtains of mist foaming at the floor. Nadia guides Tamsen and Presley into the office. The room's centerpiece, a massive desk built from sycamore. Sunlight streams in from floor-length double-paned doors. Framed artwork hangs from the walls. A sculpture made of steel stands in the corner like a centurion. Tamsen notices a familiar poster moving toward it. Her eyes scan the gruesome artwork. A small, dull-faced boy crouching on the floor and holding a sinister-looking jester puppet, the marionette strings made of barbed wire. The poster's title, Hysteric Puppet 2, The Playroom. This is where you'll be working, Nadia says, circling the desk and referring to paperwork. Mr. Zimpago already cleared you to access the system. You won't have any restrictions. You'll have access to the entire network. Tamsen approaches the sculpture standing guard in the corner of the room. The silvery figure appears as if pieces of metal were ripped away during the moment of creation. She notices a gold plaque fixed at the foot of the sculpture. It reads, Engine. Peering behind the statue, she finds a silver earring in the shape of a snake discarded on the floor. Yours? Tamsen asks, glancing at Nadia. Maybe Mrs. Zimpago's. Thank you, dear. Tamsen passes the earring to Nadia, who hastily pockets it. Then Nadia recovers a folder beside the computer monitor and pulls out a sheet of paper. A map of the property. The main house on the front side. The gardens are on the back. Where is everyone? Tamsen asks, glancing around the empty room. Everyone? The other artists, Tamsen says. I thought I'd be working with a team. There's no one else, dear, Nadia tells her. Tamsen folds her arms, confused. How can this be? Do you know what I'm working on? She asks. Nadia frowns, as if afraid Tamsen would ask. She shakes her head, embarrassed. Tamsen's face scrunches again, confused. Her eyes latch to another poster. Her face softens, surprised. Mouth opens with soundless words as she approaches the frame. The poster? A human face sculpted from coils of steel. An ornate mask of metal paired with a headdress of cables. Eyes closed. Mouth open, as if in mid-scream. A thread of black oil creeps from the cable-thin lips. Tamsen's eyes drift further down the poster, until she arrives at the title, You've Lost a Lot of Blood. She recoils. Is it this? She asks Nadia, shrinking from the poster.
Some of these could use a sheet draped over them, Nadia says, eyeing the camera mounted on the ceiling, but I don't think Miss Zimpago would approve. Tamsen drifts closer to the artwork, mesmerized. "I didn't think it was real," she says. "What is it?" Nadia asks, as if embarrassed of her ignorance. "It's a game," Tamsen explains, her eyes coveting the poster's artwork. "One of the first he ever created, but never released. I heard the system was designed so you could only play the game once. Takes permadeath to a whole new level. He hired a true fan. He's a genius." Tamsen senses Presley push himself beneath her armpit. She wraps an arm around him and winces at what her affection really is. A rehearsed imitation of motherhood, a poor substitute for a mother that's no longer there. "What's it about?" Presley asks. He said it was about changing. His games are the opposite of entertainment. They're about what the user can do for the game, not the other way around. Presley flinches slightly. "Is it scary?" "Change is always scary," Tamsen tells him. Presley's eyes remain glued to the poster. He grimaces. Nadia taps Tamsen on the shoulder, pulling her eyes away from the poster. "There's something I was told to show you," she tells her. Nadia leads Tamsen and Presley into the house's artillery chamber. Sunlight washes the glass cases filled with various weapons, each instrument organized and arranged with painstaking finesse. Tamsen scans the room in wonder-filled disbelief. "It's everything from his games," she whispers. She passes a small display case filled with a giant medieval-styled axe embellished with a dramatic snake-like handle. "From the first hysteric puppet game," she says, pressing her fingers against the glass. From her peripheral vision, she watches as Presley meanders beside another display case and intently studies a mace with an iron-spiked head in the shape of a human skull. He seems to wince at the sight. "Some of these were handmade by fans," Nadia explains. "Others he designed." Tamsen glides toward a display case, eyes widening as she studies the weapon, a tactical hammer axe. The handle sculpted with columns of human skulls, snakes slithering in the open mouths and connecting each head. The giant blade glints at her in the light. "I don't recognize this one," Tamsen says, her eyes searching the axe for an explanation. "Tam, look at this!" Presley shouts from across the room, severing his sister's concentration. She turns and notices he's standing in front of a massive wall decorated with rows of masks. Tamsen follows her brother. She doesn't notice the small bead of blood on the axe's blade. Presley covets each mask, wide-eyed with wonder. "Aren't they beautiful?" Tamsen scans the wall, studies each mask. Small golden plaques are fixed on each shelf and feature the title of every game. Some of the most puzzling: a rubber gimp headpiece in the shape of a medieval plague doctor mask, a spiked steel skull wrapped with various wires and cables, a gemstone-covered mask with massive copper horns. "It's every monster from his games," she says. "The doctor from Sick Bay, the jester from the Hysteric Puppet series." Tamsen notices one of the shelves is empty, a missing mask. The plaque reads, "You've lost a lot of blood." "He must have been pleased to hire such a devoted follower," Nadia says. Tamsen's eyes lower slightly, unsure. "I just hope he likes me." "Do you know when I start?" "You already have. Working with him, I mean." Nadia pales, as if she had been dreading such inquisitiveness. Ms. Zimpago will explain better than I can. Although Nadia strains to usher Tamsen and Presley toward the door, Tamsen stalls. "When can I meet with him?" Nadia titters, visibly nervous. "You can't," she says. "Ms. Zimpago said, how is he supposed to approve my designs if he won't meet with me?" "It's not that he won't. It's impossible." Tamsen merely searches Nadia's face for an explanation. Through a small window fixed at the center of the door, Tamsen peers into the master suite and regards her employer, Abbus Zimpago. Reclining on an antique sleigh bed, every inch of Zimpago's small body is wrapped with linen bandages, as if he were a mummified pharaoh. His eyes secreted with black goggles that make him resemble a predatory insect.
An assortment of machines flanks his bedside, tubes snaking through his dressings and attached to his hands and mouth. The devices chirp, monitoring his vitals. From the corner of her eye, Tamsen notices Nadia studying the bewilderment etched into her face. "I wasn't told the exact details of the accident," Nadia explains. Is he? The question hangs in the air for a moment, far too delicate to answer. "His sister won't say," Nadia says, "but she made one thing absolutely clear. She doesn't want me or anyone else near him." Presley's fingers lean on the fingerprint scanner beside the door. The screen blazes red. No match. "Prez, don't," Tamsen says, shooing him away from the door. "She's the only one allowed in the room," Nadia explains. "If she didn't want someone else looking after her brother, why did she hire a nurse?" Tamsen asks. Nadia shrugs. Just as bewildered as Tamsen. Tamsen's eyes return to the window, watching Zimpago's motionless body. "When can I speak to her?" she asks. Tamsen scales the stairs, reaching the landing outside Iris's attic suite. Her reflection flashes at her as she passes an iron-framed mirror fastened to the wall. She does a double take, noticing a figure looming behind her. Another metal sculpture. This one larger than the others and outfitted with a pair of steel wings, unfurled as if prepared to ascend. An elongated insect-like head embellished with the curled horns of a goat. Eyes and nose absent, only a small mouth. Its face, the front metallic panel extended from the skull, and framed with wires connected to the rim of each wing. The metal cables fastened to the creature's lips and securing them to remain open like surgical mouth props. Tamsen's eyes wander behind the figure. She notices a word carved into the wall. Engineer. She doesn't notice the TV screen beside the attic door flicker alive. Iris Zimpago peers on the screen, seated in an armchair beside a fireplace, her face obscured behind a black headpiece. She's dressed in expensive black, her voice pinched and brittle thin, as if pained. "Miss Dearling?" Tamsen jumps, startled. She squints, peering into the monitor, notices a priest-like collar belting the old woman's neck. The device blinks a red light at her and moves as she speaks. "Yes," Tamsen says. "Hi. I'm sorry. Forgive me if our meeting is short. I'm not myself today," Iris says. "Anything you need, Nadia will see to it." "She said you'd have instructions for me," Tamsen says, hesitant to approach the small screen. "We expect you to work quickly, that's all." "And the game I'll be working on? I was never told." "I imagine you've heard the rumors about you've lost a lot of blood," the old woman says. Tamsen's eyes light up. "He finished it?" she asks. "The game's been finished for years. Stuck in development hell," Iris explains. "Before his accident, he and his team overseas had completed the final beta mode of the game." Iris retrieves a touchscreen device from the small table beside her chair. Her fingers flick across the screen. "The alpha mode tested poorly with the user we contracted. We've smoothed out the bugs, but some of the designs are still embarrassing. We've already pushed back the closed beta release date twice." Iris passes the device through the electronic door slot. Tamsen swipes her fingers across the screen, her face glowing in the monitor's light. "This is all the information you'll need to complete your new design," Iris says. "All of my brother's notes. Can we count on you to fix our problem?" Tamsen, obviously overwhelmed, pulls her eyes from the touchscreen and does her best to fake a sales pitch. "Yes, absolutely," she assures her. "I already have some ideas. Illustrations I've been working on, freelance material. I was hoping I could—" "We need results soon," Iris barks at her.
"I'll see to it you're paid extra if you're as efficient as we expect. Yes, of course. When you finish settling in, you can begin work today," Iris says. "I've had Nadia arrange the suite in the East Wing for you." Tamsen stammers, hesitant to object. "I was told we'd have more privacy. Your brother's letter mentioned a carriage house?" Iris pauses, as if visibly annoyed. "I don't want my brother Presley to disturb you. Tamsen says, "You'll both have more than enough privacy in the East Wing," Iris says, folding her hands across her lap and turning away. "I don't think it would be best." Tamsen stops herself, as if surprised by her brashness. Iris does not move. Then, after an uncomfortably long pause, the old woman uncrosses her arms. "Very well," she says. "Nadia will show you to the carriage house. You'll begin work tomorrow morning." "Thank you. I'm excited to start." Iris' eyes narrow at Tamsen with intent. "You should be," she says to her. "This is going to change your life." After Nadia tours Tamsen and Presley through the remainder of the house, she guides them out to the small carriage house on the opposite end of the causeway, a small French-styled chateau tucked beside the forest's edge. Tamsen's car idles in front of the flower-gowned pathway as she and Nadia unload the baggage from the trunk. Presley loiters nearby, folding the property map into the shape of a small bird. Clouds begin to gather, hiding sunlight. The wind murmurs, a storm brewing. "You'll be much happier here," Nadia says, slipping a set of keys into Tamsen's hands. "No fingerprint scanners or holograms. It's like the Middle Ages." Tamsen drags her suitcase around the corner of the car, eyes looking everywhere but where she's walking. It's perfect. Just then, a stream of fire shoots at her feet. She jumps back, screaming. Gosh! A young woman kneels in front of her, aiming a blowtorch at the weed-cracked pathway. She's tall, broad-shouldered, and attractive enough to make Tamsen feel uncomfortable. She straightens, yanking earbuds from her ears. Her impish grin softens to remorse. "Sorry," she says. They stare at each other for a moment. Smiles break between them. Tamsen begins to laugh. The young woman relaxes, pleased she's not upset. She lowers the blowtorch. "Your feet looked a little cold," she teases. "Most people offer a handshake," Tamsen says, "not third-degree burns." "Oh, good. Donnie, will you help us?" Nadia asks the young woman. "This is the new game developer, Miss Dearling." "Tamsen," she says, offering her hand. They shake, holding hands perhaps for a second too long. "The Monster Maker," Donnie says. "I pictured you arriving in a hearse." "One more step and I would have been leaving one," Tamsen jokes. Presley ambushes his sister, revealing the map he's folded into a swan. "Look what I made." Tamsen deflates at the reminder. "This is my brother Presley," she says, pushing him toward Donnie. "Nice to meet you, King," Donnie says, shaking the boy's hand. Presley's eyes light up. "You know Elvis." "Who doesn't know the king of rock and roll?" Presley flashes a scowl at his sister. Tamsen hates him. Color fills Tamsen's cheeks. She crosses her arms, embarrassed. "I do not hate him." "He hates everything Dad used to love," Presley says. "Press," Tamsen says. But there's nothing else she can think to say. After all, she knows full well he's right. "Donnie, will you show these two inside?" Nadia asks. "I have to get back." "Thank you for everything," Tamsen says quietly. Nadia cups Tamsen's hands in her own. "You let me know if you need anything." Then she pinches Presley's cheek. "Both of you." Nadia heads off on the driveway toward the main house. Donnie grabs the suitcases, ushering Tamsen and Presley up the pathway and toward the carriage house's front door. "I've never met a Tamsen before," Donnie says. "It's from an Aramaic word," Presley explains. "It means twin." "Aramaic? That's a big word for a little guy." "He knows more, believe me," Tamsen says. "What's the word of the day, Prez?" "Verisimilitude," the boy says, as they filter inside the house. "The appearance of being true or real." As Presley unpacks his suitcase in the room next door, Donnie drags some of Tamsen's bags into her bedroom. "Did you know Mr. Zimpago before the accident?" Tamsen asks her. Donnie looks at Tamsen for instructions regarding her suitcase. Tamsen merely gestures, and Donnie hurls the luggage on the bed. "No, never met him," she says. "Only met with his sister once." Tamsen starts to unpack. "Does she always wear those?" "In the day I've known her," Donnie says, shrugging. As Tamsen reaches for another wire hanger in the closet, she stops. Head tilting, eyes cramp with confusion. She pulls out a sweatshirt. "Did I already hang this?" She turns, noticing Donnie staring.
Caught, her eyes avoid her. "Nadia wanted me to show you how to arm the security system downstairs," Donnie says, lowering her head and slipping out of the room. Tamsen's eyes return to the sweatshirt. Shaking her head, she hangs it in the closet and follows Donnie downstairs into the kitchen, where the security panel is. "It doesn't set automatically like the alarms in the main house," Donnie explains. "It's already been programmed with a passcode, but you can change it to something you'll remember." "What's the code?" Tamsen asks. Donnie refers to a small crumpled piece of paper from her pocket. 0814, August 14th. "That's my birthday. There, you won't forget it," Donnie says, passing the paper to her. "There's a phone in the living room. Dial 1 to be connected to the main house." Donnie starts to head for the door. She kneels and picks up a wicker basket filled with a bushel of freshly cut flowers. "I'll be around if you need anything," she says. "The nearest market?" Tamsen asks. "Presley can't drink milk. I have to buy him—" "Check the fridge," Donnie says. Tamsen opens the refrigerator and finds each shelf stocked with fresh produce. She locates a carton of almond milk. "She sent me to the store this morning." Tamsen shakes her head in disbelief. "But she had planned for us to stay in the main house. How did she— Oh, I almost forgot." Donnie sails over to the cabinet filled with stacks of spices and perishables. She moves some cans aside and finds an empty vase, holds it under the faucet and fills it up. "Just picked these," she says, scoops out some of the flowers from her basket and arranges them in the vase. Tamsen pales at the sight, uncomfortable. "Thought you might like them," Donnie says. "Make the room a little brighter?" Tamsen recoils, apprehensive, unsure what to say. "Thank you," she says as politely as she can muster. "I have a lot to unpack and I'm tired from the drive. I don't want to—" Donnie stammers, embarrassed for clearly overstaying her welcome. "Sure, yeah, of course, I'll leave you to it." Tamsen watches Donnie leave until she's out of sight. Her eyes drift to the flowers in the vase, her face filling with dread. She grabs the flowers, shoving them in the nearby waste bin. Tamsen searches the cabinets. She opens the pantry, shrinks at the unwelcome sight, a shelf filled with unopened bottles of liquor. She hesitates for a moment, finally makes the decision. Tamsen pulls each bottle off the shelf, rips each cap off, pours each bottle down the drain. When finished, her eyes scan the empty shelf, sees an unopened bottle of vodka tucked behind a box of cake mix. She reaches for it, but it's too far away. Pulling a chair from the kitchen table, she leans it against the counter. Before she lifts herself up, she stops, returns the chair to the table, closes the pantry. She sits at the kitchen table. Face washed in light, her fingers flick across the touchscreen device Iris had given her. On the screen, an electronic scan of a page filled with chicken scratch newts stares back at her. The text, "Filled with the capriciousness of his preferred youthful prey, only unspoiled innocence can destroy him." Beside the text, a drawing of the same wire-veined winged statue guarding the attic door. A single word beneath the illustration, "Engineer." Tamsen's eyes remain fixed on the illustration. She picks up the phone beside her.
Dials 1 and waits. Greeted with deafening silence, she hesitates, then winces. A metallic shriek answers her. She slams the phone down. "You've lost a lot of blood." Toothpick. It's hard not to wonder what horrible secrets you keep hidden away, what fanged monstrosities you nurture in your despair. I wonder if you'll show me as I take the little toothpick I've swiped from your nightstand and push it further inside your ear until it's gone. A bubble of blood beating there as if it were a confession, a horrible admission of guilt, of all the things you never shared with me. I feed you the broken bits of glass from a light bulb I once crushed between my hands. You chew, blood trickling from between your lips, and ask me if there's any more to be eaten. I think there's a small, quiet part of you that enjoys the misery I carefully feed you each day, as if it were the very thing keeping you alive. You've lost a lot of blood. I'd drown you in dark water if you weren't so beautiful. March 9th, 2018. I'd drown you in dark water if you weren't so beautiful, I tell the young man before I slit his throat with the small pocket knife I had been hiding. It's a family heirloom my father had given to me when I was a boy, because he knew I was far too sensitive for my kind, and he so desperately wanted to correct that behavior, so desperately wanted to drown out the red weed rooted deep inside me that had made his only son a faggot. I often wondered if he thought of me, engaging in intimate moments, if he had shuddered to think of his precious boy experiencing such encounters with others. She scampers downstairs and arrives at the front door, where she's greeted by Nadia's cheerful smile. Dressed in a raincoat, Nadia carries a covered tray. She lifts the platter's lid, revealing an assortment of freshly baked morning pastries. "I hope you're hungry," she says, pushing past Tamsen and gliding into the foyer. "I'm so sorry," Tamsen says. "For what, dear? I never oversleep, I promise. It won't ever happen again." "Of course, dear," Nadia says. "Is she angry?" "She wanted to make certain you and your brother were well fed for your first day at work." Tamsen follows Nadia as they move into the living room. Presley appears at the foot of the stairs, sees the tray of baked goods. Eyes widen, hungry and excited. Nadia sets the platter on the walnut credenza. "Presley, dear, have as much as you like," Nadia says. "We'll soon fatten your waifish looks." Presley scours the plate, licking his lips, picks a blueberry scone, sits on the divan and eats. Nadia tilts the platter toward Tamsen. "Breakfast wasn't the only reason I came," Nadia explains. "She asked me to extend an invitation to Presley." Presley's chewing slows. He glances up. "To the library?" "Maybe later, dear," Nadia says. "I don't understand. An invitation to Presley? For what?" Nadia looks around the room, as if priming her mind for the words she's apparently already rehearsed. Something she'd like to show him. "I really should join you then," Tamsen says. She pulls Nadia closer, whispering, "He tends to wander, and I really shouldn't let him out of my sight." "She's expecting you to begin your work today, my dear," Nadia tells her. "Then Presley can come with me," Tamsen says, folding her arms. "Or I can tell her myself." Realizing she's not going to win the argument, Nadia deflates slightly. "Very well." Meanwhile, Presley swipes another blueberry scone from the platter. Outfitted in a Bogart-like trench coat, Presley bounds down the front steps of the carriage house after Nadia. He carries the small origami swan he made. Tamsen pulls the front door shut, locking it. She does a double take, noticing Donnie approaching with a dirt-caked shovel. Nadia and Presley greet her on the driveway. "I thought she gave you the day off," Nadia says to her. Tamsen notices Presley tuck the swan inside his pocket. "Perfect day for digging," Donnie says. "She wants the oleander moved from the nursery." Presley pulls on Nadia's coat. "Can Donnie come with us?" "Where are you headed?" Donnie asks. Nadia smiles, tight-lipped. Tamsen descends the steps, pocketing the house key. "She won't tell us," she says. Presley grabs Donnie's hand, pulling. "Please, Donnie," Presley begs, pulling harder on Donnie's arm. "You have to." Presley pulls harder on Donnie's arm. "I don't have much of a choice," Donnie says, tossing her shovel aside. She smiles, as if pleased to be kidnapped. Yanking on Donnie's arm, Presley hauls her toward the forest, as Nadia and Tamsen follow close behind. Nadia leads Tamsen, Presley and Donnie down the narrow pathway, meandering through the grove of towering oak and pine. They pull their hoods up as another rainstorm sprinkles down from the emerald canopy above. Donnie eyes Tamsen with a solicitation. She ignores it, keeping her distance from her. Presley sprints ahead of the group, climbing over a small sapling blocking the path. "Prez, slow," Tamsen calls after him. She looks to Nadia, at a loss. "I've never seen him run to anything except a library." Nadia chuckles, moving ahead. Presley darts up a hill and looks out into the distance. "Look at this," he shouts back to the group. Tamsen scales the ridge, catching up to her brother. Looking out into the clearing, her eyes widen when she sees it. A giant warehouse. A man-made alien to its natural surroundings. The building dwarfs the nearby tree line, like the abandoned remains of a derelict aircraft. The gargantuan concrete structure laced with ribbons of greenery. The building's only entrance, a colossal steel-reinforced doorway with panels of windows. Presley scampers down the hill, darting into the clearing. "Prez, wait," Tamsen calls to him. But he's much too quick for her, and already halfway to the building's massive entrance.
Nadia appears beside Tamsen, seeming to savor her bewildered expression. "This wasn't on the map," Tamsen says. They weave through the field of tall grass, mere miniatures approaching the massive structure. Tamsen notices a dirt road cutting through the forest and ribboning toward the hangar's entrance. "What have they got in there?" Donnie asks. "Nukes." Presley leans against the window pane door, peering inside. Meanwhile, Tamsen looks to Nadia for an answer. "What is it?" she asks. "It's called the Silo. Mr. Zimpago had it built to house his private gaming center." Tamsen's eyes drift from the building's concrete colonnade to the steel-pitched roof. She notices an unusual symbol carved into the exterior. "I know this," presses her hands against it, recoils as if in sudden agony, rubs her head. "It's from, you've lost a lot of blood," she says. Donnie grips the handle and lifts the door open. It buckles, screeching as it flies up. "Nobody's home," she says, shrugging her shoulders. They file inside. Sunlight glitters in the dust-filled air. Vaulted ceilings latticed with ornate piping and electrical equipment. Aisles organized with inactive machinery, furnaces, boilers, generators. Presley meanders down the machine-flanked corridor, eyes searching every inch of the facility as if he were the first visitor to an uncharted planet. Human faces sculpted from metal leer at him from the ceiling's complex maze of wiring and machinery. Tamsen follows close behind, noticing another symbol drawn in black spray paint on the side of a generator. Donnie brushes past, startling her. Tamsen looks up. Chains sway from the scaffolding, creaking. She scans every inch of the room, eyes filled with wonder. "It's a replica of the game," she says. Presley nears the mouth of a stairwell leading down to a dimly lit lower level. "There's something down there." He disappears down the stairs. "Prez," Tamsen calls to him. Tamsen and the others chase after him. Dashing down the steps, Presley reaches the facility's dimly lit lower level. Nadia flicks on a light switch. An overhead panel of lights hums alive, bathing the concrete netherworld in a ghostly white glow. A vacant concrete-walled room with a low ceiling. Two sliding steel doors face one another, framed on opposite sides of the room.
An elaborate holographic control panel is thrown against the wall beside each door. Tamsen descends the stairs, drifting into the room. Nadia and Danny follow close behind. "She told me it's behind those doors," Nadia explains to Tamsen. "What?" "The thing she wanted to show Presley." Presley slides the steel door open and inches into the first isolation chamber. A pitch-black cell with a vaulted ceiling. The walls shimmering as if slick with streaks of oil. They ripple as if made from viscous, organic-looking material. The room's centerpiece, the hive. A massive mechanical device rotates on a small island accessible only by an illuminated gangplank. A leather-cushioned, body-shaped vessel fills the interior of the machine's frame, outfitted with various restraints. Tamsen enters, Nadia and Danny trailing her. She scales the small bridge, nearing the monstrous device. Looks down and sees liquid as thick and as black as oil circulating in the moat surrounding the elevated platform. Presley follows, mesmerized. "I've heard of these," Tamsen says. Presley reaches out, pinching one of the harnesses. "What is it?" "It's called a hive, a fully immersive VR simulator." Tamsen's eyes wander to the insignia etched inside the mechanism's steel scaffolding. Zimpago. Then she notices an outlet fixed near the cushioned leather headrest inside the vessel. A valve filled with wires connects to a small USB device. She reads the tiny words printed along the rim of the instrument. "You've lost a lot of blood." "How does it work?" Danny asks. Presley slides the doors apart, climbing inside the vessel. "Press, get out of there," Tamsen says. He shifts himself onto the cushioned seat, fastening a belt around his waist. "I want to play the game," he says. "Since when?" Presley slides his arms and legs inside the restraint braces surrounding the chair. "It's my turn." "For what?" "To leave you." Tamsen crumples as if his words had pierced through her. She thinks. "A compromise. I'll go with you." "No." She glances at Nadia and Danny, humiliated. Then back to Presley. "I don't want you in the simulation by yourself." "I can go in with him," Nadia offers. There's another chamber. Tamsen pulls Nadia aside. Presley leans out of his seat, listening. "He might get scared," Tamsen says. "He'll panic."
You won't know how to help him." "I don't want you to come," Presley shouts at her. "Presley, I want Nadia." Tamsen looks at Nadia, at a loss. Nadia cups her hands with mother-like tenderness. "I'll look after him," she assures her. "I promise." Tamsen approaches her caged brother. 5 minutes, then I'm turning it off. Presley doesn't react, stares her down. Tamsen slides a transparent helmet over his head. Lighted arteries of wiring snake through the headpiece as it comes alive, connecting to the USB. She pulls on his restraints, reviewing his safety. Tamsen can't bear to pull herself away, her sparkling wet eyes offering a soundless, "I'm sorry." He doesn't accept. Head lowering with defeat, she leads Nadia and Danny out of the room and back into the lower level. Tamsen drags the steel door shut. Consulting with the control panel beside the chamber, she locates a large red button on the keyboard, "Launch Sim." The door buzzes, a steel latch bolting the door shut. The light above the door flashes from red to green. A small touchscreen fixed beside the door flickers on, displaying the animated outline of a human body. There's no point to it other than to disturb the listener. Martyr. Sometimes that is the point. Ambrose. It reminds me of a far superior story. I can't remember the title, but it's about a young girl that's kept inside a cellar with a small window that looks out onto a busy street. Every day, people stop by the window and look down at the poor girl in her squalid little room. A grisly reminder that things can always be far worse. That's the point of the story. Martyr. Sometimes things don't have to be so didactic. A story can just be a story. Ambrose. Sounds like a plagiarized account of a better story. Martyr. Plagiarism implies that there's such a thing as originality. Ambrose. You don't believe plagiarism exists? I don't believe in originality. Take, for example, our art form, the slaughtering of precious young men with their future spread out in front of them. There's nothing original about the way in which I dispatch them. If this were a story, it would be mundane, trite at best. But there's such a thing as plagiarism. Martyr. It's just a construct invented by academia. It has no bearing in the real world. Unless you're a writer. What's that supposed to mean? Just that it's something most writers would fear. To be accused of plagiarism, I mean. Masters of every craft bite off the talent of those that came before them. It's perfectly natural. I expect the authorities have noted my preference for the Romanticism movement in art, with each of my offerings being elaborately staged like a grotesque painting. The last one I did, that poor boy from Chelsea, I had arranged him like the ravished woman draped across the divan in Henry Fuseli's The Nightmare 2. Now, is that plagiarism? More of an homage, a tribute. But that's an obscure reference. I doubt some authorities would even know who Fuseli was. I could have easily arranged it so that it was similar to Le Grand Odalisque. Anything by Jean-Auguste Dominique Ingres is a crowd pleaser. But far too obtuse. Besides, you would have had to wrap his head in a turban and locate a hookah to rest at his feet. So, when does it become a direct copy? I guess if you had painted something that was a clear reference, a distinct look-alike to that particular painting. Martyr. So you're saying plagiarism can only exist if it's the same art form. Writing versus writing, painting versus painting. There's no such thing of a murder scene plagiarizing a painting. I think the ramifications for that would be far worse than mere plagiarism. Martyr. I take from things all around me all the time. I take and I take and I take. I never seem to give. I'm just not that way. Ambrose is, however. He's a giver. Always has been, always will be. I have to think of the perfect painting to pair his death with. Something grand in design, but tasteful in execution. Something that will make people marvel at his demise and think to themselves, what a beautiful young man. What a glorious way for things to end. You've lost a lot of blood. The invention of skin. I often think of the first creature to be given skin, and what it must have felt like for them to be covered, to be protected, to feel safe. I often think of the first wound blooming from their precious skin, and how slowly it must have healed, a scab to be worshipped by zealots dressed in expensive black hats. I wonder how exquisite it might feel to unspool their skin like cheesecloth, until their body was a murmur that could no longer share their most shameful secrets. To hold their coat of flesh in my arms like a broken child, like a beggar sent to be tortured until they weep. You've lost a lot of blood. You've lost a lot of blood. Presley. A police cruiser idles on the dirt driveway in front of the building, flashing red and blue lights. Nadia crouches, shivering, beside the warehouse. Danny tends to her as an officer wraps a blanket around her shoulders. Nadia wipes the oil from her face with a rag. Tamsen leans against the car, arms folded, her eyes glazed over and distant, as if still in shock. She straightens, noticing the sergeant exiting the warehouse and approaching the car. She's short, overweight, her spiked hair embellished with frosted tips. The sergeant pulls a walkie-talkie strapped to her shoulder against her mouth, mumbling. Tamsen's eyes beg her for an answer, hopeful. Anything? The sergeant shakes her head. What happens now? Tamsen asks. Well, file another report, the sergeant explains. Go from there. Tamsen pauses, bewildered by the word. Another? If he turns up, give the station a call.
You still have the number? The sergeant asks, brushing past Tamsen as she opens the car door. No. Do you need his picture? Already have it on file, the sergeant says. Tamsen squints, unsure. You already? How? The report you filed last week. Tamsen shakes her head. Last week? I think you're mistaken. I wasn't here. But I have a copy of it. Chief recognized the address when we got the call. That's impossible, Tamsen says, frowning. I never. We weren't here last week. The sergeant grabs a folder on the front seat, leaves through it until her fingers land on a page. Presley Merrick Dearling. Date of birth, July 6. Weight, 82 pounds. Height. Can I see that? Tamsen reaches for the folder, but the sergeant swipes it away. She grimaces, annoyed. You said it was a false alarm, a prank, the sergeant says. No, that's not possible. This picture was attached to the file. The sergeant flashes a Polaroid at her. Tamsen pulls it close, her mouth hanging open in disbelief. The picture, Presley, smiling, in the familiar-looking back seat of Tamsen's car. The very same photo he had taken earlier. This can't be, Tamsen says. The sergeant snatches the Polaroid from her hands. We'll send you another copy of the report. The sergeant whistles, hailing her partner. As she turns, Tamsen notices the veins in the sergeant's throat. Something thick and rope-like stretches beneath her skin. She does a double take, squinting. The sergeant climbs into the car, slams the door shut. Tamsen taps on the window with trembling fingers. The sergeant lowers the window, annoyed. What if we can't find him? Tamsen asks. You'll find him, the sergeant says, her eyes narrowing at Tamsen and her voice hardening. We're stuck here until he sets us free. Tamsen's mouth hangs open, trying to understand. The sergeant pushes a button, the window rising. Peeling away from the building, the police cruiser soars down the dirt pathway and vanishes into the woods. Tamsen swats the dust from the air, coughing. Danny approaches her. What did they say? Danny asks. They said, but Tamsen stops herself. She bites her lip until it turns purple. To let them know if anything changes. Tamsen approaches Nadia beside the building. I'll keep looking for him, Danny says. Tamsen helps Nadia off the ground, draping the weak woman's arm over her shoulder. Stay with me? Tamsen asks. Nadia merely nods, leaning against her. Tamsen stands in the frame of the carriage house's front door, eyes scanning the distant forest for any sign of Presley. She folds her arms, bracing herself, as rain-soaked wind whips through the door and beats against her. Nadia creeps down the stairs, wrapped in a bathrobe. She squeezes her wet hair with a towel. Nothing? Nadia asks. Tamsen grabs her raincoat. I'm going back out. Just then, Danny rips herself out of the darkness beyond where the house lights reach and races up the front steps into the house. She lowers her hood, wiping her rain-smeared face. Tamsen eyes her, hopeful. She hesitates, shakes her head, mournful. Tamsen deflates. We'll find him, Danny assures her. It's been 4 hours, Tamsen says, pacing the entryway. I have to do something. I can't just sit here. He could be scared. What if he's hurt? Nadia staggers forward, color draining from her face. He'll be even more scared if he can't find you, she says. She sways, covers her mouth, then vomits into a nearby trash can. Tamsen wraps her arm around her, guiding her toward the couch. They sit, Nadia curling her head between her knees. Should we take her to the hospital? Danny asks. Tamsen looks panicked at the suggestion. I'm fine, Nadia says. Please. Tamsen rubs her shoulders gently. She'll stay with me tonight. I'll go back out and look for him again before it gets dark, Danny says. Tamsen softens, smiling at her. A wordless thank you. Danny nods, accepting her soundless gratitude. Then heads back out the door and across the lawn toward the forest. Tamsen's eyes follow Danny until she vanishes into the woods. Nadia stirs on the couch, rubbing her head in visible agony. Tamsen notices, drags the vomit-filled trash can toward her. Again? Tamsen asks. Headache, Nadia says. Something to eat? Tamsen picks up the silver platter, hesitates, then slams it back down on the credenza. She sits beside Nadia, nervously rubbing her fingers through her hair. Nadia's eyes avoid Tamsen. What happened in there? Tamsen asks. Nadia shakes her head, searching her thoughts. She looks at Tamsen, eyes filled with fear. I don't remember. Tamsen turns away, looks out the rain-washed window. I'm sorry, Nadia whispers. Tamsen doesn't respond. She looks at the main house in the distance, a fortress tethered against the storm-swept horizon. It's then she notices a dark shape watching her from the attic window. Later that night, Tamsen stays up and watches the rain beat hard against the windows. Lightning flickers, a dark silhouette appearing between the colonnade of oak at the forest's edge. She squints, rubbing her eyes, as the figure approaches. Another flash of lightning, to reveal, it's Presley. Drenched in glistening black oil, he staggers into the clearing and limps toward the carriage house. He winces, rain battering him and slowing him as he hobbles through the monsoon. A gust of wind shoots across his path, leveling him. On hands and knees, he drags himself toward the front steps. Ribbons of oil swirl down his body, vanishing as the rain pummels him. Tamsen dashes outside, switching on the porch lights, and covers her mouth when she sees him in all his monstrous glory. Press! She cries out. Darting down the steps and across the lawn, Tamsen holds Presley in her arms. His eyelids flutter open for a moment. Lips open to speak, but can only murmur. Eyelids close again. Tamsen pulls him tight against her, shovels him from the ground, and carries his body toward the house. Nadia, she calls out. Limping up the steps as she cradles Presley in her arms, Tamsen disappears inside the small house. Nadia, arms filled with blankets and a first aid kit, approaches the bathroom. The faint clatter of feet approaching behind the door. The door opens, Tamsen appearing in the frame. Nadia peers inside, sees Presley, dripping wet, standing by the window. Suddenly, his eyes snap to her. She recoils. Tamsen tiptoes into the hall, closing the door behind her. How is he? Nadia asks, passing the blankets and emergency kit to Tamsen. He's not hurt, thankfully, Tamsen says. Needs a bath, though. I'll get it ready, Nadia says. You've done enough. I don't mind. Tamsen squeezes Nadia's hand with a silent thank you, then turns the door handle, slips back inside the room. Later, after Tamsen had drawn his bath and let him soak for a while, she slips back into the bathroom and finds her little brother lounging in the bathroom's clawfoot bathtub. Wisps of steam rise from the scalding hot bathwater. Presley drags a washcloth along his oil-soaked arms. Squeezing it in his fists, black sludge hoses the water. He stirs, uncomfortable, as soon as she enters. Tamsen averts her eyes. I won't look. I promise, she says. She grabs the trash can beside the toilet, sets it down near the bathtub, in case you need it again. Glances at Presley for a reaction. Nothing. She paces beside him, unsure what to say. How do you feel? My head hurts, he says quietly. Tamsen softens. Where were you? What happened? She asks. Presley doesn't answer. He stares at the dark bathwater, unblinking. Tamsen notices a pile of his wet clothing discarded on the floor. She scoops it up. Tamsen turns away, dumping Presley's clothing in the marble sink. She braces herself against the counter, eyes avoiding her reflection in the mirror. I thought I lost you, she says. Then Tamsen pivots, facing him. He winces, covers himself. I'm sorry I'm not better at this, she says. Tamsen inches toward the bathtub, cautious. Clean slate? But Presley doesn't react. Tamsen shrinks, deflating. Lowers her head. I'll be outside when you're finished, she says. Call if you need anything. Tamsen shuffles toward the door, glancing back to Presley one final time. He looks away. She shuts the door, disappearing, and doesn't seem to notice the wire slithering beneath the skin of her brother's shoulder. Tamsen's eyelids flutter open, a gray sky threatening with more rain framed in the window above her bed. She rolls over on her side, greeted by Presley. Dressed in pajamas, he stands beside her bed. His lips crease with a smile, the cheerful face she's always known. "Hey," she says. Tamsen pushes herself up, leaning against the headboard. "Everything all right?" Presley nods. "Fine." Tamsen rubs her eyes, yawning. "You're sure?" She presses her hand against his forehead, feeling his temperature, checks his hands and arms for bruises. "Nadia says if I help her with chores today, she'll show me the library," he says. 1,200 first editions. So, well, stay? Why wouldn't we? Presley crawls off the bed, moving out of the room. Tamsen stirs in bed, unsure. She looks up and notices a black centipede peering down at her from the edge of the ceiling fan. Tamsen runs a pot under the faucet, the phone pressed against her ear. "Hi. Yes, I filed a report yesterday and I'd like to withdraw it," she says. "What's your name?" the officer on the other end of the line asks her. Tamsen sets the pot on the stove, cranking up the gas. "Last name, Dearling. First name, Tamsen." "For a missing person?" the officer asks. "Yes," Tamsen says. "My brother. It was a mistake. I'm sorry." Tamsen winces, the phone releasing a shrill metal pulse. The officer's voice cuts out. Tamsen checks the phone, then pushes it against her ear. "What was?" "It's going to start all over again," a voice whispers to her. The line goes quiet. Tamsen holds the phone closer. A livid screech. Metal against metal. Tamsen jumps. She hangs up the phone. Tamsen's face washed in a silver glow as she sits in front of the computer. Hands guiding the mouse with nervous precision, her eyes remain fixed on her work. On the computer screen, a grotesque face stares back at her, confined to a small window inside a design program. The creature's leathery skin as transparent as amber and shrouded with a curtain of cobwebs. The crown of its bulbous head eaten away and exposing long, thin spindles of insect legs. She drags the cursor over one of the limbs, fanning out from the creature's cracked skull, adding definition to the artwork with an animated paintbrush. Clicks File, Save As. Types in, "You've lost a lot of blood, design, _1A." Presses down on the mouse. Saved. She stiffens in her seat, sensing something watching her. Turning, her eyes dart to the metal sculpture looming in the corner. She scans the golden plaque. Engine. Eyes returning to the screen, she opens a file titled, "You've Lost a Lot of Blood, Prototype." On the screen, a small map of the game's industrial-style setting framed beside a text window filled with the game's coding. Tamsen scans each line of text, her eyes widening. She clicks File, Print. Tamsen tiptoes down the hallway, clutching sheets of paper. She slows as she nears the attic stairwell, the sounds of a woman's sobs becoming louder. Reaching the foot of the stairs, she peers up at the landing outside the attic suite. Inching up the stairs, she reaches the door. The sobbing grows deafening. Tamsen reaches out, hesitates, then knocks. "Ms. Zimpago?" Finally, a break in the sobbing. Muffled whimpers. Tamsen waits. There's no response. "Ms. Zimpago, are you all right?" She waits again. Finally, Iris's soft, bird-like voice responds from the other side of the door. "What do you want?" Tamsen swallows, eyes going over the pages in her hands. "I was going over some of the coding for the game to run a demo of my design." She pauses, waiting for Iris to respond. Nothing. "I found something. It's a large break in the coding. It looks like it was designed by Mr. Zimpago to be part of the player's experience." Tamsen's eyes wander to the statue of the engineer beside the door. A wide mouth made of iron grins at her. The program is locked, so the user can only access the system once. But theoretically, they could manipulate the code break and use it to play the game again. It would be like creating a new gaming account, a new version of themselves. Once again, no response. Tamsen presses her ear against the door, listening. "Ms. Zimpago?" The crash of glass shattering. "Go away!"
Tamsen lurches away from the door, flying down the stairs. Glancing back at the attic door, she hastens down the hall. Until the sounds of Iris's sobs are dimmed to murmurs. Her pace slows as she reaches Abbus Zimpago's bedroom door. Peering through the window, fixed at the center of his door, she regards her employer's motionless body. She scans his linen-wrapped face, glistening black goggles staring back at her. Pressing against the frame, her hand leans into the scanner beside the door. It chirks. The screen burns bright green. Access granted. She pulls her hand away, dismayed. The bolt retracts with a thud. The door swings open. Puzzled, Tamsen remains without movement. Mouth opens, eyes searching for an explanation. Bathed in a pale white glow, the room more closely resembles the sterility of an ICU. The dim pulse of the machines monitoring his vitals fill the space with a steady hum. Tamsen approaches the bed, eyes scanning the sparsely decorated room. Towering over his small body, her eyes drift from his bandaged feet to his linen-wrapped face. She notices a black spot blooming beneath the edge of his pillow, presses her finger against it. Still damp. Rubs her fingers together, slick like oil. She reaches out, about to remove his goggles, when her eyes snap to the floor. An origami swan, discarded beneath the bed. Tamsen bends down, picks it up, covers her mouth in horror as she realizes it's Presley's. Tamsen tucks the swan in her pocket and darts out of the room. Slams the door shut as she scurries down the hall and toward the conservatory, where she finds Presley and Nadia enjoying their afternoon tea. Tamsen tucks the swan behind her back as she approaches them. "He recited the entire plot of Wuthering Heights to me until I showed him the library," Nadia says, chuckling. Immediately, Nadia seems to notice Tamsen's flushed face. "Everything all right, dear?" Tamsen catches her breath. "Yes, just—" She turns, motioning for Nadia to follow. Nadia searches Presley for a reaction, smiling, as she moves away from the table. He doesn't even notice her absence, eyes glued to the book. Tamsen leads Nadia further down the path until they're out of his earshot. She reveals the small white swan. "I found this. You remember?" Nadia nods. "Presley made it. It was in Mr. Zimpago's room." Tamsen passes the folded paper to Nadia. "You went in?" Nadia asks, bewildered. "Do you know how it got there?" Nadia holds the swan close to her face, mouth hanging open. "I couldn't even guess. Mr. Zimpago. He can't move, can he?" Tamsen asks. Nadia hesitates to answer, seemingly puzzled by the question. "I don't know what to think," Tamsen says. "There's a reason it was in there." Glancing at Presley, she crushes the paper swan in her fist. Presley climbs into bed, dragging sheets over him. Tamsen sits at the end of his bed. She eyes the hardcover book on his nightstand. "I can read to you? If you want." "You don't want to," Presley says. Tamsen shrinks, hurt. He's right. I wouldn't offer if I didn't. But she knows he's not convinced. She watches him as he rolls over on his side, facing away from the light. "I'm almost finished with it," he says. Tamsen lifts herself off the bed and reaches for the lamp. She pauses, softening as she looks at her brother. Mouth hangs open for a moment with muted words. Finally they come out. "Press. Just because we don't like the same things, it doesn't mean I don't love you." Presley turns, light washing half of his face. Tamsen searches his face. She notices a small bump below his eyelid. It's pointed, sharp-looking. He stares at his sister. "Tam?" She pushes her finger against it.
Lurches back as it stirs beneath his skin gently. Presley winces at her touch. There's something. She grabs the lamp, holding it against his face. He covers his eyes, squirming. "What are you doing?" he asks her. Tamsen guides the light across his skin until she realizes the bump has vanished. She lowers her aim, setting the lamp down. Just then, a knock at the front door. Tamsen opens the front door. Danny, dressed in a damp raincoat, appears in the frame. She holds the blowtorch. "Finishing up," she says. "Just wanted to see if there's anything I could do." Tamsen drops her shoulders, deflating. "We're getting by," she says, moving into the living room. Danny, confused, follows. She sets the torch beside the door. "I just wanted to see if he needed anything." Tamsen folds her arms, swallows hard. "He's fine." Danny looks at her skeptically. I just thought—" She stops, recognizing she won't give in. "If he needs anything, I'm around." Danny starts to leave. Tamsen hesitates. "I think—" She stops, searching for the words. "Something happened to him when he went into the game," she says. "He's different." "How?" Tamsen shakes her head. "I don't know. It's like he's changing. Except he still hates me." She sits on the couch, wiping tears from her eyes. "He doesn't hate you," Danny assures her. "He should." Tamsen exhales, shoulders drooping, as if her body were buckling under the pressure of the secret. "I blame him for what happened to our parents," she says quietly. "I can't look at him without being reminded of it. I thought of all the different ways I could leave him, like he was a dog. Couple months ago, I took him to help me do some laundry, gave him $1 to go to the vending machine, and when he wasn't looking, I got back in my car, drove away." She covers her mouth at the memory. "I drove around for a few hours, realized what I had done, and finally went back. Police were already there. I told them it was an accident, that I didn't mean to." Tamsen looks away from Danny. She sobs. "I'm a monster. I'd do everything different if I could." Danny hesitates. She wraps an arm around her. Tamsen settles into her embrace, crying. She pulls her closer. "You went back for him," Danny says. "That was your second chance." Tamsen pulls away from her, confused. "Why are you being so nice to me?" Danny smiles. "Think of it as a clean slate." Their eyes fasten to one another, an invisible electrical current pulling their bodies closer together. Tamsen presses her lips against Danny's, then pulls away. Her face flushes, as if humiliated. Danny grabs her, their mouths pushing together. Their passion escalated, a shared moment of intense connection. Tamsen hears the chirp of metal scraping against metal. She lifts her head slightly, something catching her attention in the floor-length mirror across the room. Her eyes lower to below her waist, where Danny's reflection should be. Instead, the wrought iron creature, a wire-veined framework. It moved towards her, wires zigzagging across her skin. When Tamsen screams, jumping up, Danny lurches back. "Get out!" Tamsen cries. Danny flinches, horrified and confused. "Get really out!" Danny swipes her raincoat, dashes out the door. Tamsen follows close behind, bolting it shut. She chokes on short, shallow gasps. She leans against the frame and lowers herself until she's slumped on the floor, holds her knees tight against her chest, sobbing, and remains there until daylight. Tamsen leans against the desk, resting her hand against her face as she stares at the computer screen in Zimpago's office. She nurses a glass of whiskey, pours more from the bottle. On the screen, the spider-head creature glares at her. She clicks File, Move to Trash. The grotesque face sucked from the screen, vanishing. Tamsen rubs her head, exhausted. Dragging herself out of her seat, she moves to the windows overlooking the garden. She notices Danny kneeling beside a carpet of purple milkweed with a pair of pruning shears. She rises, wiping the sweat from her forehead. She looks up at the window, her eyes meeting Tamsen. Tamsen stiffens, skittish, remains unmoving. Caught. Danny flashes her middle finger, then collects the nearby wheelbarrow and moves away from the house. Deflated, Tamsen returns to the computer, slumps in her chair. Tamsen reaches for the mouse, her hand knocking it on the floor. Bending over, she peers under the desk and notices a USB device hiding behind one of the legs. She pulls it out, studies the writing written on the band of packing tape, Zimpago interview unreleased. Tamsen inserts the device into the monitor. She waits. On the screen, a black window pops up. An animated hourglass appears, the video loading. Tamsen clicks, the dark window filling the entire screen. She presses play. On the screen, a wrinkled, sun-wizened face fills the frame. Abbus Zimpago. Outfitted in expensive black, his tailored suit accents the thinness of his frame, as gold bracelets dangle from his toothpick wrists. An off-camera interviewer questions him. "We've received a lot of fan requests to ask you about you've lost a lot of blood," the interviewer explains. "Is there anything you can tell us?" Zimpago grins, as if pleased to be asked. His lips wrinkle. "Sono desiderosi. It's about la trasformazione. The best games are like viruses you can't cure. They change us, stay with us long after we've finished playing. You've Lost a Lot of Blood will be an experience like no other. Tamsen, her face washed in silver, stares at the screen. Light flickers across her eyes as the video plays. Some people have taken to social media to announce their plans to boycott the release, the interviewer says. Can you explain why the user can only play the game once? Zimpago stirs in his seat, adjusting his ascot. If we want virtual reality to be as lifelike as possible, do we receive second chances in life? I appreciate the dedication, my fans, but this project was made so that my creation could touch as many people as possible. It's my gift to the world. You said in an interview recently that your new game, You've Lost a Lot of Blood, is intended only for users between the age of 10 and 20. Why is that? The interviewer asks. L'immaginazione of the youth is the most sacred thing in the world, Zimpago says. What do you have to say in response to the allegations made about the violence in your games by concerned parents, especially the Chalice family? As you know, their daughter won the... Just then, Zimpago's faceless, well-dressed handler enters the frame and blocks Zimpago from the camera. Mr. Zimpago has no comment, the handler says. We're done here. The video cuts to black. Tamsen moves the cursor over the internet icon, clicks. Her fingers flick across the keyboard. Types in Zimpago, Chalice. The first result, a link to an obituary. Danny Chalice. She clicks on the link. Eyes scan the web page. Tamsen covers her mouth in horror. It's a picture of Danny. She looks closer, sees a silver earring in the shape of a snake coiling around the rim of her ear. She reads the article. Danny Chalice died on Tuesday, March 12th, at the age of 20, as the result of a brain aneurysm. Danny was a student at the University of New Hampshire. While in school, she served as the president of the Gaming League. She had recently won a gaming contest sponsored by the internationally acclaimed Zimpago project. Tamsen clicks File, Print. The machine hums, printing. She finds another article. Chalice family blames daughter's unexpected death on violent video games. She presses on the link. A picture of Abbus Zimpago greets her. Tamsen reads further down the page. The article reads, She wasn't my daughter anymore, Laura Chalice, Danny's mother, told sources. The games had changed her. Her daughter, an avid game enthusiast, had won an exclusive all-access pass to new gaming technology at Mr. Zimpago's private estate the month prior to her death. Tamsen's eyes widen further as she reads, reaches for the mouse, clicks, print. She knocks over a miniature statue on the desk. The figurine shatters on the floor. Kneeling, she swipes at the bits wedged beneath the desk's leg. Hands fumbling with one of the desk drawers for support, she presses against a gilded handle. A panel in the wall slides open. Tamsen looks up, startled. Approaches the opening. A passageway stretches in front of her. She disappears inside. Every inch of the low-ceiling vault, the glistening reflective surfaces of dark metal, the dim murmuring of whispers. Tamsen approaches a candlelit altar built from steel. The mirror-like walls, an ornate mosaic of various parts of human anatomy threaded with centipede-like wires and cables. Some extremities are attached to cranks and gears. Faces are lost in a labyrinth of couplings and spindles as long and thin as insect legs. Tamsen winces. Gnarled mouths scowl at her as she passes. Peering inside the small metal bowl fixed at the center of the altar, she covers her mouth at the sight. Presley's Polaroid camera, her cell phone. She snatches them from the bowl. Then notices something remaining, a silver earring in the shape of a snake. She shoves the earring in her pocket and tears out of the room. You've Lost a Lot of Blood. Bodies Made of Honeycomb. December 7th, 2018. Long before I had met Ambrose, I became involved with a young man who had a distinct and somewhat unnerving predilection. He was boyishly handsome in his looks, the kind of youthful vitality that could not be persuaded to temper its enthusiasm. He had a way of speaking, a way of commanding the room and others around him as if they were mere servants to his fancy. I often found myself to be completely enraptured by his charm, his good graces, and his exceptional table manners at the finest eating establishments in the city. Our intimate moments were robust and vigorous, to say the least. I was entirely submissive with him, and we connected deeply at any time and any place. Although our intimacy eventually tired and became tedious, I can assure you that I did not kill him because he grew fatigued of my desire for connection. I didn't kill him because he overdressed at parties or adored any opportunity to show himself off as the superior in thought and personality, despite my obvious grooming as a prime bachelor from one of the state's most noble families. I killed him because he shared with me something so abhorrent that my ear could scarcely credit his words. Every Sunday, he would visit a nearby hospital and claim to be a guest of a patient in the ward where most of the patients undergoing chemotherapy are warehoused. This was his peccadillo, as he lovingly referred to it, always eager to share his flair for other languages. When admitted by a nurse, he would stalk the hallways in the ward and look for a room where a patient was sleeping. Whether it was the halo of light that glinted from their bald head or the tubes securing their nose, he couldn't be certain what attracted him to these poor, hopeless souls. Regardless, he was all too eager to enjoy himself while he was there. He would watch them as they dozed, probably high on morphine. It didn't matter to him if it was a man or a woman or even a child. To him, their bodies were exotic gardens blooming with disease. To him, they were hardly human, bodies made of honeycomb instead. He said he felt no pity for them, felt nothing remotely like sin or perversion when he contemplated the seriousness of what he was actually doing. There was no remorse, no semblance of sympathy, no hint of compassion. I regretted how I had so unabashedly given myself to him, my body, my mind. I felt ill, as if my intestines were curling and turning black from when we had last shared a passionate rendezvous. I felt as if I had been polluted, as if my body no longer belonged to me, as if there were a giant black tapeworm coiling itself inside me and growing more and more every time I thought of him and his penchant for defiling their poor defenseless bodies, the pleasure he took from his perverse acts. So I decided to kill him. I called him over one night and arranged the bed so that he thought we wouldn't be talking much. When he was finally naked and ready, I took an empty champagne bottle and smashed it over his head. I smashed him again and again, the bottle cracking apart and the bits sparkling on the floor like bits of sea glass. I twisted the broken pieces into his face until I saw a white fang of bone poking through his skin. When I was certain he was dead, I shaved him until he was completely bald. He resembled one of those monks from the 15th or 16th centuries, a pastiche of a holy man, when I knew full well there was nothing holy or sacred about him. After I had shaved his head and dressed again in his clothing, I drove his lifeless body out to the old rock quarry just outside of town and left him there to be found in the morning by workers. I couldn't help but laugh, thinking how he resembled the kinds of people he had manipulated and used for his own satisfaction. There was something so satisfying about seeing him lie there, splayed out against the rocks, arms raised above his head, as if questioning God why he had been taken at such a young age. He almost resembled Sir John Everett Millet's exquisite painting of Ophelia. Rain began to sprinkle as he lay there like a Danish princess, rainwater threatening to drown him just as she had been drowned in the river. I wondered if I was right to kill him, if I had saved some poor innocent child from his cruelty, or if I was no better than him, a monster capable of performing the most sadistic and vicious acts. Surely there must be something said for my intentions, my yearning to smear him from the world and others like him. Then again, it begs the question, why do I kill? What satisfaction do I derive from taking the life from someone as if I were squeezing the juice from a lemon? Am I a monster because I killed him? Of course, he deserved to die. But then, do I for what I've done? Am I no better than him? Does morality serve a purpose here? And if so, who comes out on top? Or are we both monsters that deserve no sympathy? Not long after I killed him, I had learned that there were others like him, others that unabashedly delighted in the thought of the young and old afflicted with terminal illness and undergoing chemotherapy.
They called themselves the Wax Priests, a carefully selected and highly exclusive group of men of all ages with a certain penchant for disease. I didn't know how I might set about my plans, but I knew for certain I wanted to find each of them and make them suffer. You've lost a lot of blood. Diaspora. I watch them from my window. Little priests made from wax. Their melted faces. Their bodies made of honeycomb. They drip like burning candles and walk as if they carry the secret of a language long since dead and never to be resuscitated. Skin like Chantilly lace, shiny like an alligator's hide. I watch them as they file up and down the empty streets where they had died. Holy men left to rust in the morning sun. You've lost a lot of blood. You've lost a lot of blood. Tamsen hastens out of the main house and makes her way toward the carriage house at the end of the causeway. She flies inside the small house, darts up the stairs, and sprints into Presley's bedroom. He turns away, face pressed against the rain-hosed window. "Where's Nadia?" Tamsen asks. Presley doesn't answer. She hurls his suitcase on the bed, flings open his closet, grabs an armful of clothes, dumps them in his suitcase. Presley won't look at her, distracted by the rain. "We're leaving," Tamsen says, zipping his suitcase shut. "We can't," Presley says. "In the car. Let's go." She drags his suitcase into the hall, disappearing. If she had stayed, she might have seen Presley twitch, a long, thin shape stirring beneath his skin and coiling around his throat. She might have seen her brother wince in agony, metal spikes bursting across his face and braiding his head with thick cables of wires. She might have seen her brother wince in agony, metal spikes bursting across his face and braiding his head with thick cables of wires. Tamsen winces. Gnarled mouths scowl at her as she passes. Peering inside the small metal bowl fixed at the center of the altar, she covers her mouth at the sight. Presley's Polaroid camera, her cell phone. She snatches them from the bowl. Then notices something remaining, a silver earring in the shape of a snake. She shoves the earring in her pocket and tears out of the room. You've lost a lot of blood. Bodies made of honeycomb. December 7th, 2018. Long before I had met Ambrose, I became involved with a young man who had a distinct and somewhat unnerving predilection. He was boyishly handsome in his looks, the kind of youthful vitality that could not be persuaded to temper its enthusiasm. He had a way of speaking, a way of commanding the room and others around him as if they were mere servants to his fancy. I often found myself to be completely enraptured by his charm, his good graces, and his exceptional table manners at the finest eating establishments in the city. Our intimate moments were robust and vigorous, to say the least. I was entirely submissive with him, and we connected deeply at any time and any place. Although our intimacy eventually tired and became tedious, I can assure you that I did not kill him because he grew fatigued of my desire for connection. I didn't kill him because he overdressed at parties or adored any opportunity to show himself off as the superior in thought and personality, despite my obvious grooming as a prime bachelor from one of the state's most noble families. I killed him because he shared with me something so abhorrent that my ear could scarcely credit his words. Every Sunday, he would visit a nearby hospital and claim to be a guest of a patient in the ward where most of the patients undergoing chemotherapy are warehoused. This was his peccadillo, as he lovingly referred to it. Always
Even worse, she might have seen him lift his head, revealing a sinewy vent of tissue fixed at the center of his throat. The flesh around the device burned red as if cauterized. Instead, Tamsen sees none of that. She darts into her room and snatches clothing from the closet, pouring the heap into her suitcase. Zipping it shut, she hauls her suitcase off the bed and flies out of the room. She doesn't seem to notice the sweatshirt she's left dangling in the bedroom closet. Tamsen hastens out of the house, dragging suitcases. She unlocks the trunk and loads the baggage. Dragging the driver's door open, she slides into the seat, pushes the key into the ignition. The car purrs alive. She pants, out of breath. Tamsen glances back at the house, the empty doorframe filled with light. Presley's nowhere in sight. "Prez?" she calls out. No response. Climbing out of the car as it idles, she scales the front steps and flits back inside the house. Tamsen rushes to the foot of the stairs, calling, "Prez, let's go." Presley doesn't answer. Tamsen grips the banister, about to dash up the stairs when she hears the chirp of metal dragging against metal, the sound coming from upstairs. She recoils, paling, looks around the room for a weapon, spies the blowtorch Danny had left beside the front door. Swiping it, she creeps up the stairs, aims the weapon. As she reaches the top of the stairs, she finds Presley's door open a sliver, the room pitch black. Pushing the door open with the blowtorch, Tamsen peers into the dark room, finds Presley standing beside the window, looking off. Her hands fumble along the wall for the light switch, flicks it up and down. No light. Gripping the blowtorch tighter, she inches into the room. "Prez?" Presley twitches when he speaks, as if it pains him to talk. His voice thin, as if his lungs were filled with iron. "There's somebody outside," he says. Tamsen shrinks at the unfamiliar sound of his voice. "What?" Presley turns, the light from the corridor washing his face. Tamsen covers her mouth at the sight. Presley flinches, dagger-tipped metal wires blooming from his skin and snaking across his body. His neck extends, gears made from muscle lining the wire-threaded shaft of his throat. His cheeks bulge with crankshaft mechanisms spiraling from underneath his skin. He whimpers, inches toward her. "It hurts," he says quietly. With trembling hands, Tamsen aims the blowtorch at him. "You're not my brother," she says. Presley groans, kneeling. Lowering his head, he reveals a wire-threaded pipe sprouting from the crown of his skull. He rakes his head back in agony, his wrists snapping backward as pistons shoot through his arms. He screams, wires whipping inside his mouth as his jaws stretch further. Wires burst from his mouth, skirting across the floor toward Tamsen. She lurches back, stumbling out of the room and into the hallway. Fishing in her pockets for the house key, she locks his bedroom door. She jumps, screaming, as Presley's body slams against the door. The hiss of wires thrashing. The door handle shakes, twisting. "What did you do to my brother?" she asks. Wires whip beneath the door, belting Tamsen. "It's me, Tam," he shouts at her from beyond the door. Tamsen shrinks until she's backed into a corner. The blowtorch, her only defense. She hears the sound of the front door creaking open. Footsteps enter the house, creeping up the steps. Body pressed against the wall, she sneaks down the corridor. Hiding, she aims the blowtorch at the stairwell. Lightning flickers, throwing a dark shadow against the wall as the figure nears the top of the steps. Tamsen swallows hard. Before another moment of hesitation, she screams, vaulting around the corner, pulls the handle. A stream of fire bursts from the nozzle, hosing Danny's face. The flames lick her head, revealing a set of steel wires beneath her skin. She widens her blackened jaw, releasing a guttural growl from her wire-clogged throat. Charging at Tamsen, she grabs her by the throat and squeezes, then pins her against the wall as she squirms helplessly. "The game's not finished," Danny says. Slamming her head against the wall, she knocks Tamsen to the ground. The blowtorch slips from Tamsen's hands and rolls across the hall. She lunges for it as he grabs her legs. Swiping the torch, Tamsen swivels and sprays Danny with the nozzle again. More of her face blisters, revealing sheets of metal beneath. "You're already dead," Tamsen shouts at her, slamming the blowtorch against Danny's head. Danny's knees buckle, hands grasping at the air. She falls back, flying down the stairwell until she crashes against the floor. Lightning flickers, her limp body flashing in the light as it lies crushed at the foot of the stairs. Tamsen coughs, steadies her breathing. Inching down the steps, she approaches Danny's lifeless body. Her open eyes doll-like and vacant. Her face charred black. The exposed pink tissue glinting with flecks of light. "It's a machine," Tamsen says quietly. Wiping her mouth, her eyes snap to the top of the stairwell. Sees Presley standing there.
Pistons fire, pulverizing his head. Gears revolve, wrenching his flesh until his face is a sinewy mask of exposed muscle. She jumps out of the way as he scampers down the stairs, vaulting over Danny's dead body. Tamsen ducks, more wires flying at her as Presley passes. He darts out of the house, the vent in his throat releasing a deep growl. He dashes across the lawn and heads for the forest. "What have you done to my brother?" she calls after him, but he doesn't respond. Tamsen tosses on her raincoat, grabs a flashlight. Then she darts out of the house, chasing after him deep into the forest. Presley races down the narrow pathway, leaping over fallen branches and dodging shrubs. He grunts, wheels and cylinders cranking as they bury deeper in his skin. Black fluid drips, exploding from the wheezing steel pipe fixed in his head. Tamsen's flashlight shimmers through the thicket. She bounds after him, racing toward the silo. "Where the really is he?" she shouts. Glancing back and noticing Tamsen approaching, Presley hurries further away, dodges between trees, and meanders off the pathway. He hurtles over a moss-covered log. Tamsen scales the same log, trips, slams against the ground. Presley gains the advantage, sprinting ahead. Tamsen wipes herself clean, gets back on her feet, staggers after Presley. Glancing back at her, Presley accelerates as if he were powered by a train engine. Grunting, faster and faster. He dashes out onto the ledge of a large rock, looks back as he sails ahead, and falls. Plummeting over the side of the ridge, he crashes against the riverbed. Tamsen covers her mouth, screaming. Presley splayed out, lying without movement. Blood as black as oil smeared against the rocks. Tamsen crawls the ledge, lowering herself to the ground. She circles his lifeless body, training the flashlight on him. Presley's body twitches. The steel pipe fountains like a geyser. Black sludge hoses the ground. Tamsen shields her face, oil showering her. A giant centipede, an engine, slithers out from the drooling hole in the imposter's head. The insect's body, glistening black, smeared with fluids. Its chain of legs, iridescent metal. The creature leaps across the riverbed. Slowing as it crawls further away from Presley's body, it's without movement. Tamsen studies Presley's skinless face. Looks closer, his mouth gagged and overflowing with wires. "You're not my brother," she says. She steadies her shallow gasps until she grunts, tightens her fingers around the flashlight with a threat. Tamsen, face smeared with oil, darts out of the forest. She hastens into the clearing, toward the carriage house. Rain drizzles, a distant rumble of thunder. Her car, still idling in the driveway. She races up the front path, stops, finds Nadia standing in the open doorway, sees Danny's body where she had left it, crumpled in a heap at the foot of the stairs. Nadia can scarcely speak, her head shaking in disbelief. "What did—" Nadia's voice trails off, in shock.
Tamsen squints, thinks she sees a strand of hair poking through Nadia's hijab. She looks closer. It's a wire. Nadia shrinks, noticing Tamsen's fury as she approaches. Tamsen lunges at Nadia, screaming. Nadia dodges the attack, hurrying across the driveway and toward the main house in the distance. Tamsen follows, close behind. "What have you done to him?" Her screams echo through the nearby pines. Tamsen chases Nadia to the main house. She darts into the marble entryway, a predator on the hunt. She notices the door leading to the armory cracked open, light spilling into the foyer. Crouching, she skulks toward the doorway. Tamsen creeps into the room. It's empty. She weaves between rows of glass cases filled with various weapons, the blades glinting at her in the light. The ceiling camera rotates, following her as she moves. Glancing back, she knocks against a glass case, steadies her balance, squints, peering inside. The tactical hammer axe. Pulling down on the glass door's level, she reaches inside and grabs the weapon's handle, holds the blade close to her face, admires her reflection. The scurrying of feet outside the door. Head snaps up, ears perking at the noise of prey on the move. She grips the axe's handle tighter. Tamsen enters the grand hall, brandishing the axe. A shimmering screen of water crashes into the room, mist rising in thick clouds from the foaming apron of water. "You knew it the whole time," she says, circling the edge of the room. "You took us there on purpose." Tamsen raises the blade above her shoulders, about to strike. Thunder crashes. The power goes out, light sucked from the room. The waterfall flickers out, vanishing. Lightning flashes in the skylight, light drenching the room and revealing Nadia as she crouches on the floor. Tamsen's eyes narrow at her, slams the axe down. Crash! Nadia screams, dodging the blow. Tears out of the room, sprinting into the armory. Nadia lunges for a glass case filled with a giant medieval mace. Tries to open the door. Won't budge. Locked. Tamsen appears in the doorway, swinging the axe. Releases a deafening battle cry. Nadia swipes a dagger fastened to the wall and heads for the entryway. Nadia races toward the door, Tamsen on her tail. Clutching the knife, she fumbles with the handle. Ducks, screaming as Tamsen hurls the axe at her. The blade misses her head, slams into the wall. Nadia flings the door open. The dagger slips from her hands. Nadia flies down the front steps, bolting toward her car. Pats her pockets. No keys. She pulls on the doors. Locked. The alarm rings, a deafening pulse. Tamsen appears in the doorway, flying down the steps with the axe swinging in her arms. Nadia screams, deserting her car and heading for the forest. From a distance, Tamsen watches Nadia stumble through the trees and dodge her flashlight. Kicking off her heels, she soars down the path until a fallen tree branch stabs her foot. She crashes to the ground, screaming. Cradling her wounded foot, she pinches the end of the broken spear as it lodges itself deeper inside. Pulls on it, cries out in agony. Tamsen appears at the crest of the ridge, tiptoeing down the path. She slows as she recovers Nadia's shoes, discarded in the center of the path. "Where's my brother, you really difficult person?" she shouts into the air. Just then, Tamsen spies Nadia further up the path. She charges at her, screaming, and raising the blunt end of the axe high above her shoulders. Bringing it down, she slams the handle against Nadia's head. Nadia hangs upside down, hunter's netting secured around her ankle tightening as it dangles from a tree branch. Her eyelids snap open, wide-eyed. Coughs as she labors with every painful breath. Her palsied hands reach behind her head. Then passes her hands in front of her eyes, fingers wet with blood. She winces, head throbbing. Just then, a circle of light washes her blood-smeared face. She squints, raising her arms to shield her eyes. Tamsen approaches, aiming the flashlight on her. "Please, don't," Nadia begs, squirming as her body dangles there. "I was only doing what I was told." Lightning flickers, Tamsen's hate-filled face blinking in the light, her eyes blazing with fury. Thunder rumbles in the distance. "Where is he?" Tamsen asks. Nadia moans, her speared foot thrashing against the net. Tamsen brandishes the axe. "Where really is he?" Nadia swats at her, pleading, her final defense. "He's still in the game," Nadia says. Tamsen's light searches Nadia's face. She watches as metal spikes sprout from Nadia's head, vein-thin wires circling the woman's throat until they form a black collar. "You're not Nadia," she says. Nadia's voice frail and distorted. "He was supposed to set us free, and you ruined it, difficult person." Suddenly, Nadia's body snaps in half as if she were a rag doll. Tamsen recoils at the sight. Nadia convulses, transforming. A giant metal drum surfaces between her shoulders, bending her over until she resembles a hunchback. Pistons and cranks burst through her clothing. She rakes her head back, screaming, reveals a valve fixed where her mouth used to be. Gears swirl, removing her skin. Tamsen raises the axe, slamming the blade against Nadia's face. The screech of metal against metal. She strikes her again, black sludge hosing her face. Nadia's oil-slimed head rolls to the foot of the tree. An engine uncoils from its hiding place, slithering out from the hollow iron rod of Nadia's severed vertebrae. The creature scampers across the ground, rearing at Tamsen before it dies. Tamsen wipes the oil from her face, panting. Gosh. She soars up the embankment, spots the framework of the silo hidden behind the portico of trees at the forest's edge. Sprinting down the causeway, she comes upon a deep trench. Peering down, she finds a sheet of canvas blanketing the ground. Tamsen crawls down the embankment. Skating to the edge of the canvas, she rips back the material and reveals a mass grave. Naked bodies arranged in a large pile like firewood, snarling limbs twist around one another in a puzzle of human anatomy. Tamsen covers her mouth, circling the pyramid of corpses. Oh my God. She sees a familiar face confined to the entanglement, a decapitated death mask framed between an elbow and a kneecap. Nadia. Draped beside Nadia's body, Danny. Her face barely recognizable, crinkled and revealing bits of lyres beneath her skin. Another familiar face catches Tamsen's attention. She covers her mouth, realizing. Mr. Zimpago, she whispers. Abbus Zimpago. The glassy, unblinking stare of a martyr. His throat slit, the wound cemented brown with dried blood. A naked older woman is sprawled over Zimpago's lifeless body. Dried blood as thick as wax drools from the hole in her shoulder. Tamsen's eyes scrunch, trying to recognize the woman. She can't. Tamsen skirts away from the mass grave, sidestepping tangled limbs. Scaling the trench, she climbs to safety. Wiping the mud smeared against her clothing, she recovers the axe beside a rock. I'm coming, Prez, she says as she begins to make her way toward the silo. You've lost a lot of blood. The Bone King. There's something unnatural, something so deliciously grim, when you consider what will become in due time, when you consider how our fragile bodies will break down and rot, entropy and decay claiming us before we're nothing more than a mere human stain, a sculpture puzzle of bones, a liturgy of human anatomy that once was and will never be again. I think of that often. I think of how unfair humans have it when compared to precious insects, little creatures without morality or burden of fear. Integrity is a foreign language to them. They don't speak in compassion or understanding. They know nothing of manipulation and degradation, things only human beings could invent to pit one against the other. Insects merely wish to survive, like all other living things.
There's supposedly a type of cockroach that can live for an entire week without its head if it's been decapitated. A headless creature, foraging, feeding, reproducing, desperately trying to live and maintain its place in the food chain. I think of myself as that cockroach, crawling toward oblivion without a head and frantically straining to survive, no matter how terribly the world might want me to perish. Of course, I scarcely expected myself to live past the age of 25. I certainly could never imagine myself rotting inside a box for all of eternity, skin dripping away, maggots burrowing in hollow sockets, remnants as pale as moonlight left in my body's place. I'd rather push ingots into both of my eyes than feed earthworms in a hole in the ground. If that's where I'm to end, then what's the point of any of this? None of this has meaning. You and I have no worth, no real consequence if you look at it objectively. Life has no meaning. If that's the case, why shouldn't I take it? Especially if they deserve to be killed for finding sexual satisfaction in something so ghastly. Bodies are not made of honeycomb, they're not made of wax. Ever since the invention of skin, the human body has been a vessel of mystery, a purposeless shadow of oneself, something to be revered for its complexity, but also never understood. And perhaps that's the point. Maybe we're not supposed to understand our purpose here. But if that's the case, what's the point in carrying on like this? Carrying on like a puppet of some ancient deity? There's no point to any of this. They've started to refer to me as the Bone King because of my penchant for removing one of my victim's bones before I abandon the body. Would we do the same for a cockroach? Am I no better than an insect that scurries beneath a nearby desk when the lights come on? Tell me, I'm asking. There are queens in certain bug colonies, just as there's royalty for humans, a privilege, a birthright to be born into. Humans and bugs aren't as far removed as one might imagine. And maybe that's intentional. Maybe they're a way for us to see ourselves outside of ourselves, a way to understand our cruelty, our sadistic behavior, our manipulation. I'd rather be a cockroach without a head than continue carrying on like this. You've lost a lot of blood. Chernobyl. Skin like moth-eaten cloth, a mouth that frowns easily and seems to know well the vertebrae of despair.
fingers crawling across every notch, every nook of bone. I might have once thought he was handsome, might have once blushed in his presence, and taken to thoughts of the two of us, our sweat webbing together, our lips eager to make confession of our most private thoughts. He doesn't keep me waiting there long, doesn't seem bothered when I ask if everything's all right. He's already pinning my body's most vile secrets to the small board and gesturing to the X-ray as if it belonged to someone long since dead, a secret language lovingly buried in hemlock and ivy. He circles the tumor in my brain with his index finger and explains things will get worse before they get better, even if they get better, that is. He uses words like malignant and stage 4, then other words like chemotherapy and terminal. I think I can sense it when I close my eyes, my mind's most shameful secret, a lewd thought armored with spikes and centipede feet to carry it toward oblivion. I feel the small pebble whirl inside the riverbed of my mind, drowned by a gentle current, a voice that only speaks when no one is listening. You've lost a lot of blood.